Chapter 282. Definitely strong. I heard that they have entered the national competition and got the first place in the regional competition. I also watched that game. The old players didn't play, and only the new players played so well. This year's Sakura Stream team is really unfathomable. I heard that in the friendly match with China the day before yesterday, they also suppressed the opponent in all aspects. But the Chinese team is all girls, There was a hubbub of voices as people discussed one after another. The captain of Sakura Stream team didn't care, but after glancing at the group, he asked the person next to him, "I heard that there are 2 Chinese players here who are very good at ranking, right?" There are indeed 2. When the Tokyo people were excited, their tone would rise. But they don't seem to be here now, and I can't see them in the game. The players of Sakura Stream team heard this and frowned. That's a pity. They also wanted to see who was here to give all the Tokyo teams a show of strength. Sakura Stream team had 3 friendly matches this time. The first one had already been played. There were 2 more. One of them was said to be against the #1 team in the country from China. So, Sakura Stream team thought that it was the Xiangnan team that had just arrived. They didn't consider the Supreme Alliance, because no matter how humble the Japanese looked, they were born with pride in their blood. In their eyes, anyone who wasn't #1 was not qualified to compete with them. Even if they knew that in the Supreme Alliance, there was a person that their captain had lost to. But so what? After the individual ranking match, it was the duo match, and then the team match. Except for the individual matches, they were not sure. In the remaining 2 matches, the Supreme Alliance was not at the same level as them. What's more, now the captain had become the most valuable esports player in Tokyo, and both his hand speed and skills had improved a lot. Even if the opponent had beaten the captain, now it was impossible for him to be the opponent of the captain. It should be the Xiangnan team that arrived early. The one who spoke was the vice-captain of Sakura Stream team. He smiled and looked a bit handsome. Prepare well. The captain of Sakura Stream team calmly agreed and took the team out of the training ground. Captain Yamaguchi. The 3 players standing there opened their mouths. One of them casually put his hand on the shoulder of the other. "We're going to practice our hand speed here. You go back first." Yamaguchi turned his head and glanced at the rookie king that their team had just recruited this year. He said in a low voice, "Shuji, don't cause trouble." "How could that be?" The man called Shuji smiled slowly. The Tokyo teams really like to practice their hand speed here. Therefore, Yamaguchi had no reason to stop his teammates. But after the troops left, the look in Shuji's eyes changed immediately. This person had always been bloodthirsty. During the qualifiers, it was easy to see the ruthlessness in his body. Tokyo was their territory. How could they allow those ignorant Chinese to steal the limelight? So what if he left? He would come back eventually. He was waiting right here. Teach that China's #1 team a lesson. In reality, the Supreme Alliance's group didn't leave. Chapter 283. No matter what kind of person Liuli was, she was right about one thing. Right now, the most important thing for Supreme Alliance was time. Because in this team, there were 4 new members who hadn't played together in a match yet. According to this situation, it meant that there was no change in the lineup. To make full use of everyone's abilities, they had to do a combination. But time didn't allow for it. Originally, the Qin group's internal competition was held in advance to break in. But no one expected that Qin MO would cancel the qualification. So not only outsiders, but even Secretary Liang didn't quite understand Qin Mo's decisions at certain times. Feng, he was more optimistic about this approach, and he praised. As the saying goes, there can be no construction without destruction. Supreme Alliance has been established for so long. It's time to do something unexpected. It was indeed unexpected. After all, the new members didn't have many competition records, and their opponents didn't have enough data to analyze them. But at the same time, breaking in was a big deal as an attendant. Secretary Liang saw all the pros and cons in his eyes. And as a member of a professional team, he knew this better than anyone else. After the dishes were served, Carly chuckled and said to Fujio in a seemingly unintentional manner, "We all watched your match, and it was indeed wonderful. But those people were too inexperienced, and they were flustered by your luring. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been so defenseless against a new account like you. Their attention was completely diverted away from you. Peking University is still the best. One person diverted the entire opponent's attack power, and he held on for so long. With such a god blocking in front, it should be easy to win the selection contest, right? The implication of this sentence was that Yin Wuyao was the main reason why she had such a wonderful victory in the selection contest. In fact, Fu Jiu had only used her strategy a little better, and that was because her opponent was too weak. Fu Jiu listened to that, and her thin lips curled up. She put a piece of meat in her mouth and said meaningfully, "It was very easy." Yin Wuyao frowned. He was old, and he had suffered many betrayals when he was in a professional team. In fact, he didn't like the undercurrent between professional players. This was because some of them had formed a habit when they spoke. They wouldn't just say whatever they wanted to say. They would praise one person and belittle another. Only he himself knew what kind of existence the youth was in his heart. If it wasn't for Spadesy, he would never play in the professional league again. He really didn't understand how this member of the Cali squad could be so imaginative. She even looked as if she had guessed correctly. Others had never thought about what they had thought about. Besides, did Spadesy need to prove his ability? 99 FC kills in Zone C. Other than Sheen Mo, who else had achieved such a result? Are these women blind or what? Even if it was a new account, it still needed to be skillful in order to wipe out the entire team. Yin Wuyao, who had wanted to act cool in front of the girls before he left the house, now only had the corners of his mouth twitched, and he didn't have any other thoughts. He finally understood why the team captain asked Secretary Liang, "Is this really their friendly team?" Of course, a man wouldn't fuss over something like that with the other party. Chapter 284. Even if there was enmity, it was targeted. Moreover, they were all old friends, so they didn't mind teasing each other. So the other members of Supreme Alliance didn't understand the meaning behind those words. It had nothing to do with intelligence. It was a hidden sense of xenophobia under that enthusiasm. Only the xenophobic person could understand it. And the teammates who had been through so many things with Fu Jiu could feel it even more clearly. Even if it wasn't too obvious, they could still get a little bit of it. "Oh yeah, Yao Yao, did you not go through professional training?" A girl sitting next to Shui Yao Yao leaned over and lowered her voice to a volume that only the two of them could hear. "I'll teach you after dinner. You've always been playing in the wilderness, so you probably don't know much about teamwork. There are some things that you need to pay attention to. Anyway, we're all friends, so you can ask me if you don't understand anything. Also, we all know about your family's financial situation. If you need any help, you can come to us. We're all girls, unlike guys like them, who don't care about such things." There was nothing wrong with those words. However, the girl quickly added, "In the future, if there's anything you like, just tell us directly. But there's one thing, we don't like it when people touch our things without even greeting us. Don't bring out your bad habits from school." Bam! Shui Yao Yao stood up. The others didn't know why, but they saw that her whole face was red, and she gritted her teeth. "What do you mean by that?" Shui Yao Yao was still trying to persuade herself that even if the other team was scheming, she shouldn't have a direct confrontation. After all, once something happened, it would cause trouble for Highness Jiu. Even if they called her fat or ugly, it didn't matter. Anyway, it wasn't the first time she had been criticized in school. But the other party pointed out the one thing she couldn't tolerate the most: stealing. That person was basically saying, "You're so poor, tell us if you like anything. We can give it to you, but you can't steal from us." Shui Yao Yao thought that after that interview, the truth should have been revealed. But sometimes it wasn't like that. Some people believed that she was what she was. There was no reason, just because she was poor. Therefore, there was no guarantee that he would have such thoughts. The one thing Shui Yao Yao regretted the most was returning the things she picked up to its owner. The owner was just like the beauty in front of him. She had an expression that said, "You like my stuff, so you stole it from me. After stealing it, you were afraid of being discovered, so you returned it." Why were there so many people in the world like this? Shui Yao Yao didn't understand. Her anger and depression had pushed her to the limit, and when it exploded, it was Everyone in the restaurant was looking in her direction, their gazes filled with strong disapproval. The members of Supreme Alliance were stunned. After all, no one heard the conversation between the girl and Shui Yaoyao. Shui Yaoyao couldn't help but clench her fists when she saw the gazes directed at her. Perhaps in the eyes of most people, her current behavior would make her look like an ugly, fat, and uncultured poor person. Chapter 285. The beautiful girl from the Cali team, who was sitting opposite Shui Yaoyao, had a frightened look on her face. She shrank her shoulders in fear. Plus, she was petite, so she always spoke softly to everyone. Now that she shrunk, it gave people the impression that Shui Yaoyao was being unreasonable. No one knew what was going on. This time, there was no one else sitting next to Shui Yaoyao except for that girl. Because the dining table was rectangular, Japanese-Chinese food meant that everyone had their own portion, so the male team members all sat opposite, including Fu Jio and Feng Shang. Feng Shang's first reaction was to grab Shui Yaoyao's hand and ask her to sit down. Shui Yaoyao sat down too, but her expression showed no sign of backing down. Even Feng Shang could feel her fingers trembling because she was holding it in. Feng Shang wasn't a person who knew how to judge people, but he knew that no one would be this angry if they weren't really wronged. He could even empathize at that moment and wanted to ask Shui Yaoyao what was going on. However, before anyone could open their mouth, the girl's eyes reddened. Did I say something wrong? I apologize if I hurt your self-esteem by talking about your family, but I wanted to teach you how to play with good intentions. Not only me, but everyone in our team knows that if a player without professional training suddenly joins a team like the Supreme Alliance and participates in the national competition, it will be easy for them to not cooperate well. I told you all this because we are too familiar with the Supreme Alliance and don't want to see their level drop. Lin Xiaodong looked like she couldn't stand it anymore. She pulled the girl aside and said to Shui Yaoyao in a cold voice, "Who did we offend? Not only did you not listen to other people's opinions, but you also shouted at us. Is this how the new members of the Supreme Alliance behave?" Shui Yaoyao was filled with hatred. She looked at the girl and thought that she was too stupid. How could someone with such looks say such things? She took a deep breath and knew that it was useless to say anything else. She didn't know how to act, and she didn't have the girl's beauty. But she gritted her teeth and said, "Don't talk about my family and don't slander me." Slander? The beautiful woman widened her eyes, as if she didn't know what was going on. Liuli pulled her hand and pretended to lecture her. Yaoyao is different from us. The environment she comes into contact with is different from ours. Watch your words. Then she smiled at Yaoyao. I didn't expect Yaoyao to be such a sensitive girl. Your family situation shouldn't be discussed so casually. But Yaoyao, what others say doesn't mean anything bad to you. Don't be so impulsive in the future. Look at what you did. Everyone in the restaurant is looking at us. Yaoyao smiled at Yaoyao. Shui Yaoyao had no way to refute such an argument. Only then did she realize that the one with the highest level of humor wasn't the girl who had mocked her and then pretended to be innocent. Instead, it was the captain of Carly, Beauty Azure. Things were obviously not like that, but she made it sound like that. Shui Yaoyao's fingers drooped in despair. Then at this moment... Chapter 286. As soon as Fu Jio said that, everyone quieted down. Secretary Liang, who still wanted to say something, was stunned by the sudden aura. He retracted his long legs that were about to take a step forward. That pretty girl with red eyes paused, clenched her fingers, and turned her head to look at her captain, Liuli. Liuli looked up and met the silver-haired youngster's eyes. Her mind was very active, and she said naturally, "What guidance? Supreme Alliance and Cali have been friends for so many years, and a competition would hurt the relationship." The Supreme Alliance people didn't know what was going on. All they saw was Shui Yaoyao getting angry at Gue, and they couldn't judge anything else. So they had to admit that Liuli was right. A competition at this time would obviously hurt the relationship. Coco reached out his hand to pull Fu Jio, meaning that she should sit down first and talk about it later. Fu Jio slowly narrowed her eyes, and she didn't want to back down at all. Liuli chuckled, and she wanted to say something more. Just at this moment, an indifferent and deep voice suddenly came from the other side. Didn't you just say that winning or losing in the selection contest has nothing to do with him, and that he is not good enough? Since that's the case, then guide him. No one expected Qin Mo to speak at this time. Even Secretary Liang couldn't help but look at his CEO. Coco was even more confused about his captain's actions. The captain was so smart that he must know that a competition at this time would affect the relationship between the two teams. Liuli's expression froze, and she looked at that still handsome and noble face in disbelief. Usually at this time, men wouldn't care, but why this time? Chiemo didn't speak anymore, and he leaned back with a lazy and imposing posture. It was obvious that he didn't say those words casually. Lin Xiaodong wasn't good at Chinese, and Chimo's tone was very calm, so she laughed out loud her heart. Even Almighty Qin said that this useless young master of the Fu family was not good enough, and he asked someone to guide him. It seemed that Almighty Qin had enough of this legendary rookie king, Spade Z. He was arrogant, and he even brought an ugly and fat pig into the Supreme Alliance and protected him again and again. Lin Xiaodong sneered. Did he really think that the Supreme Alliance was his? Now, Almighty Qin had spoken. In that case, there was no need for them to be polite. Lin Xiaodong and Gue, whose eyes were still red, looked at each other. Gue smiled and said, "Since Almighty Qin has said so, then let's have a match. Friendship first, competition second. If I win, please don't take it to heart, young Master Fu." Of course. Fujio looked at Qin Mo when she said this. Qin Mo didn't have any special expression. He held the Japanese teacup in his hand, looking elegant and cold. It was a 1v1 qualifier. The closest game location was the training ground. The team members returned to their reserved seats and entered the game to watch the match. At this moment, Supreme Alliance was in a complicated mood. There were also 2 or 3 girls in the Cali team who felt that the atmosphere today was unusually strange. Xiao Tong and Gue weren't like this in the past. Perhaps that Shui Yao and Fujio were too annoying. Chapter 287. They completely believed in Gue's ability. As an official member of the Cali team, Gue was not only outstanding in Jiang City, but also had a certain fan influence all over the country. Different from her sweet appearance, her attack power was very strong, and her maneuvers were sharp. Even if this Spade Z was the FC King, that was only when he was playing in the wild and playing with his teammates to clear dungeons. Spade Z would only show how powerful he was if his opponent was weak. In fact, people like this were not rare in the whole country. The members of the Cali team had their own ideas. So, in their eyes, Gue was guiding Fujio in this impromptu match. However, none of them noticed that the moment the silver-haired young man put on his headphones, he seemed to have changed completely. That pair of black and white eyes no longer exuded an enchanting smile, but a completely black glint. That kind of stubborn, bloodthirsty look. Gue didn't have any strategy. She just felt that facing a newbie, she just needed to be vigilant enough. Even if that person was the FC King, she hadn't played as many professional matches as she had. In a 1v1, there was no one to block the knife for him. With her own attack power, Spade Z could not last more than 5 minutes. Gue was waiting for the final countdown in the game. It's starting. As soon as the words Coco were typed, the character with the name Spade Z waved his hand and threw out an unexpected stun skill. Gue wanted to dodge subconsciously so that she wouldn't be hit. Such a child's play? Gue manipulated her character, turned sideways, and laughed disdainfully. However, she didn't expect that right at this moment. A pure black silhouette suddenly jumped out from her empty left side. Gue's eyes widened. When did it happen? How did he come here? She didn't see him at all. She didn't even notice him. After the stun skill, he could still continue to attack. Gue had never seen this kind of fighting style. Spade Z. Just how fast was his hand speed? Not only Gue, But also the Cali team members who were watching this match froze with their right hands that were holding the mouse. Click! Fujio's slender hands were still dancing on the keyboard. Following the rhythmic tapping sound, she raised her sword. A bright light flashed on the screen, and Gui's body splattered with a huge amount of blood. Her HP bar had been cut in half. But that was not the most important thing. Most importantly, at the same time, Fujio was able to free her hand to type, "I will slowly kill the remaining half of your HP. Next, I will attack your right hand." As soon as Gui heard those words, she subconsciously wanted to raise her defense. But thinking was one thing, and acting was another. Before she could defend herself, another wound appeared on her body. His HP dropped by another half. But at this moment, no one understood why Fujio stopped. Tilting his head to look, the young man was indeed no longer attacking. Instead, he was sucking on a lollipop and holding the mouse in his hand. There was a devilish smile on his face. "Heal!" Lin Xiaodong couldn't help but turn on her microphone to remind Gui, who was stunned. Logically speaking, this was against the rules. Chapter 288. Gui didn't care about anything else. Staying alive was the most important thing, so she quickly replenished her HP. But at the moment when her HP was fully replenished, Fujio typed on the keyboard and moved beautifully. With a slight shake of the mouse, she used her ultimate skill, but it only took a second. Gui's HP was reduced by half. Lin Xiaodong watched from the side and hammered the table heavily. "Left side, there's a gap on his left side." The spectators could see things that the players couldn't. With such a piece of information, Gui pulled out her sword and wanted to slash at Spade Z. But that person was already in front of her. However, in the next second, with a swift movement, he silently appeared behind her, just like those experts from ancient times. Fujio smiled lightly and lowered her sword. Gui only had 1/10 of her HP left. Similarly, at this moment, Fujio didn't move again. Her black clothes were cold, and her long life was like jade. Gui continued to heal. History repeated itself for the third time. Not only her, but the spectators also realized what was going on. Little Spade did it on purpose. He deliberately gave her time to heal, and then cut off her HP bar. He did this over and over again. He was simply torturing her slowly. Half an hour. This game had been going on for half an hour. Spade Z just didn't want to cut off the last drop of her HP. In this half an hour, she was as embarrassed as she could be. She felt a sense of helplessness that she had never felt before. And every time Spade Z attacked her, he would tell her where he was. But she couldn't even put up a simple defense. Liuli couldn't sit still in front of the computer. She went to Secretary Liang. "Secretary Liang, it's about time. It's getting late. If we continue, it will really hurt our relationship." How could Secretary Liang make such a decision? Whether the midfield could be suspended or not depended on Boss Qin's decision. But Qin Mo just played with his slender fingers with his deep eyes, as if he didn't see anything. His side profile was handsome and noble. Secretary Liang's heart couldn't help but skip a beat when he saw this scene. Could it be that when Boss Qin agreed to this match, he had already planned to shed all pretense of cordiality? Secretary Liang had been by Qin Mo's side for a long time. He knew that once Qin Mo made a move, he would be ruthless. How was this letting Carly's team members guide young Master Fu? It was obviously letting young Master Fu teach others a lesson. "President Qin, this is not the way to spoil your little brother." However, the Cali team couldn't see through Almighty Qin's plan. Lin Xiaodong couldn't wait any longer. She took advantage of the time when Gui was replenishing her HP and swapped her computer with Gui. You guys, Feng Shang really didn't expect the other party to be so insatiable. It's fine if they just revealed information outside the arena, but now they're even changing people. Everyone knew that playing games had a certain level of fatigue. This meant that Fujio would have to face a new fighting force. But unexpectedly, the more it was like this, the more bloodthirsty Fujio's smile became. That devilish attitude was just like how she used to hack into the network. In front of the computer, Fujio was wearing pure black headphones in her silver hair. Her side profile was fair and handsome, and she moved the mouse in her hand. Intense and beautiful silver light shot out in unison. Chapter 289. It didn't even take a minute. Lin Xiaodong, who was ready for another round, was killed in seconds. Not only the Cali people, but also the Supreme Alliance people were shocked. After all, that hand speed was too fast. The whole screen in front of Lin Xiaodong was filled with silver light. As the last ray of silver light fell, her character fell heavily to the ground. Lin Xiaodong couldn't accept such an ending. She squeezed the mouse in her palm and wanted to crush it. Their Kali team was the goddess in the hearts of all otakus. When had they ever been humiliated like this? However, after the killing, Fujio chuckled and typed 4 words. It was those 4 words. All the members of the Kali team froze. She said, "Thank you for your guidance." That was a slap in the face. After all, they were the ones who wanted to guide each other. In the end, the members of the Kali team didn't want to mention this result at all. Gue, who had been tortured by Fujio again and again, was a little dazed. But Lin Xiaodong's anger hadn't subsided yet. But even if she was angry, what could she do? That "thank you for your guidance" was in front of them, and it made them angry but speechless. These beauties also wanted to ask their friends from the Supreme Alliance to help say a few words about Spadesy. He was a man, so how could he win against a woman? But Chinamo stood up at this time, with one hand in his trouser pocket, and said casually, "Don't try to guide my team casually in the future." After saying this, Chinamo looked in the direction of the youngster. "Leave when you're done. Why are you still sitting there?" Fujio laughed. "Yes, Captain." The members of the Kali team all froze. At first, they thought that the reason why Almighty Chin agreed was because they were friends. And Captain Lioli, but now, Almighty Chin's words were too obvious, and it was full of coldness, which could be regarded as a very serious warning. Lioli couldn't possibly not understand, so she also stood up. "Almighty Chin, our team members really meant well. Whether it's good intentions or not depends on the recipient, not the one who sent the invitation." Chin-mo chuckled, his gaze icy. "Both Z and Shui Yaoyao were recruited by me. No matter how much you think they aren't suited to stay in Supreme Alliance, don't show it. If you do, as the captain, I will treat you as my enemy." The Kali team members' ears buzzed when they heard the last sentence. Shui Yaoyao never thought that Almighty Chin would speak up for her. She thought Almighty Chin didn't like her. In fact, Almighty Chin's gaze was very obvious. Whenever his gaze fell on her, it would always become unfriendly. But under such circumstances. However, he said, "As the captain, I will treat you all as enemies." Shui Yaoyao finally understood why there were so many people who trusted Almighty Chin for no reason. Because this person was really domineering. At that moment, she felt that Almighty Chin and Highness Gio were strangely similar. No wonder the two of them admired each other so much. It had nothing to do with appearance. It was because the two of them had the same beautiful 3 views. Chapter 290. Fujio walked in front of Chin-mo with a deep smile. "As a new member, I didn't embarrass Brother Emo, did I?" Chin-mo laughed as well. He grabbed the youngster's collar with one hand and pulled him forward. His voice was deep. "Stop flirting. Other than hand speed, there are other things you need to train." Chin-mo glanced sideways at the 2 members of the Kali team. "You should thank them for being your sparring partner." Sparring partner? Almighty Chin was talking about sparring. No matter how bad Lin Xiaodong's language was, she could understand what it meant when she put the words together. Almighty Chin had done this on purpose. From start to finish, it was all. Didn't I say it just now? "Thank you for your guidance, but..." Fujio clenched her hands. "I also feel that I didn't do it well just now, and I should have done a little slower. I wanted to do it like how Brother Emo taught someone a lesson during the live broadcast, but now it seems that making the opponent lose HP bit by bit is also a skill. I can't help it. Compared to Brother Emo, my murderous aura is too strong." Hearing these words, Gue and Lin Xiaodong felt nothing but hatred. Even Lin Feng rubbed the bridge of his nose. Did this brat not enjoy killing to his heart's content? Since he felt that he hadn't done it beautifully enough, Lin Feng didn't know what to say. Qin Mo looked into the youngster's eyes. As long as you don't use your murderous aura in real life, it doesn't matter how many you kill in the game. Fu Jiu smiled and didn't continue speaking. It seemed that in the future, even if he had some hidden thoughts, he would have to hide them better. However, she was a hacker and did not like to kill people. This time, the other party had touched her bottom line time and time again. She knew Shui Yaoyao very well. This girl had been enduring from the beginning. If it wasn't for something that she couldn't bear anymore, she wouldn't have exploded. Too many people only looked at things from the surface. Sometimes, even she was the same. But countless times, Fu Jiu saw He Honghua's shadow in Shui Yaoyao. They were strong and unyielding, loyal and upright. Why should he be despised just because he was poor and fat? Such an unfair situation almost destroyed He Honghua, a mother who loved her wholeheartedly. Fu Jiu wouldn't allow the same thing to happen to Yao Yao again. What's more, her people didn't need to endure it all. Seeing this, Liuli realized that she had made a huge mistake. She shouldn't have let her team members show their unfriendliness so inconspicuously. That man was smarter than anyone else. He must have noticed something. Liuli was anxious. The relationship that she had painstakingly built over the past year could not be destroyed just like that. Even if he had to brace himself, he had to leave one person alive when the two sides moved in the future. It's our team members who took it for granted. Liuli turned her head and said to Fu Jiu, "Young Master Fu is a well-deserved rookie king, and Miss Yao Yao is also very outstanding. I apologize for my team members' rashness. I look forward to your performance in the national competition." Fu Jiu nodded. Lin Xiaodong was still unconvinced, even more so than Gue. However, after listening to her captain, she had no choice but to bury all the hatred in her heart. After all, she understood that falling out with Supreme Alliance wouldn't do them any good. However, Qin Mo didn't accept it. Rather than saying that he did not accept it, it would be more accurate to say that he did not care at all, because all his attention was on the youth beside him. Chapter 291. What are you looking at? The youngster's action of turning back was too obvious. Of course, Qin Mo's attention was distracted. Fu Jiu looked back. "I feel like someone was looking at us just now. Your intuition is good." Qin Mo's voice was very calm, sounding like an ordinary elder brother praising his younger brother. Fu Jiu was of course happy to be praised, and she wanted to say her opinion. But the Almighty's next words were a trap. How did you cultivate such good intuition? Just from a simple school environment? You really can't let your guard down in front of the Almighty. Fu Jiu let out a long sigh and blinked her left eye. She looked very handsome. I learned it in school. The teachers in number 1 middle school liked to stick their necks in through the back door. Over time, my intuition got better too. Brother Mo, as a straight A student, you won't be able to understand how a straight A student like us has to be extremely vigilant before we dare to take out our phones when we want to send a WeChat message or read a novel in class. We must have good intuition to do this. Otherwise, not only will our phones be confiscated, but we will also be called to the teacher's office for a heart-to-heart talk. Qin Mo listened to the youngster's explanation and raised his eyes slightly. Fu Jiu knew that no matter what, this reason should have moved the Almighty a little. But the Almighty was always unexpectedly direct. It seems that you are very experienced. How many heart-to-heart talks did you come up with this conclusion? Fu Jiu, she seemed to have misunderstood something just now. The Almighty's mood didn't seem to improve. It's getting late. Qin Mo glanced at the clock hanging on the wall and said to the stupefied team members, "Go back to the hotel. There are new arrangements for tomorrow's schedule." "Yes, Captain." Lin Feng and the others reacted half a beat slower. After all, the conversation between Captain and Little Spade felt weird. It seemed that only the two of them could understand it, and the others were all confused. And Captain really treated Little Spade differently. Since Qin Mo said that he was leaving, Liu Li couldn't force him to stay. She forced a smile and wanted to send the Supreme Alliance out. But when Fu Jiu walked to the machine at the door, suddenly, she felt something under her feet. If it weren't for Fu Jiu's quick reflexes and good skills, she would have been lying on the ground. Qin Mo was walking in front of Fu Jiu. When he heard the noise, he immediately stepped back and dragged the youngster to the left. Then, his cold eyes locked onto the culprit on the right. He was a Tokyo man with a handsome face. He wore headphones on his head, and his hair was blonde. His eye sockets were deep, and his eyes were dark. This phenomenon was caused by the frequent reversal of day and night. His outstretched leg was definitely not unintentional, because that posture was full of provocation. A team from China? The man spoke in Tokyo dialect. Not all the team members could understand what he was saying. But Qin Mo and Fu Jiu knew. That person stood up and looked at Fu Jiu. You did a good job just now. Oh, I forgot. You guys don't understand Japanese. Boss, help me translate. No need. Fu Jiu's voice was indifferent. I understand. Chapter 292. That kind of attitude carried a very obvious provocation. Even Lin Feng and the others, who didn't understand Tokyo dialect, could see that this person was not friendly, so they all gathered around. But the Cali team members exclaimed, that's Shuji. Shuji. Lin Feng also paused. You mean he is the super rookie king of Sakura Stream Team, the one most likely to inherit their captain's glory? Liuli's eyes were full of worry. Yes, it's him. But strange, why is he here? The players of Sakura Stream Team should still be training at this time, and this person is very difficult to deal with. In this friendly match, Captain Yamaguchi of Sakura Stream Team didn't even play, and we only won one match in the duo competition. The other two matches, the individual competition and the team competition, were all suppressed because of this Shuji. Although Spade Z's hand speed is very fast, it is not enough to face such a strong opponent. Feng Shang, who was standing next to them, couldn't help but look in the direction of his idol when he heard this. Fu Jiu's mouth was still half-hooked, and Qin Mo's expression was cold and noble. Seeing that these two people were not affected, Shuji smiled gloomily. What? You don't dare to fight? Fu Jiu glanced at him, with one hand still in her trouser pocket, and her voice was very casual. It's not that I don't dare, I'm not interested. The more indifferent the tone was, the more Shuji's eyes were full of evil. As the most promising rookie king in Tokyo, Shuji had never met such an interesting opponent. Don't get me wrong, he said interesting, not to praise, but the more he acted like this, the more sense of accomplishment he would feel when he broke his opponent. It seems that the number one in Huaxia has its own pride, but Xiangnan is nothing compared to us. As Shuji said this, he stood up straight. So, put away your arrogance. Or, do you mean that Huaxia people only know how to bark, but actually have no ability? Hearing this, all the players in the training ground roared with laughter, because in their minds, that was the image of Huaxia people. Speaking of the shortcomings of Huaxia people, there were simply too many. They were of poor quality, and when they traveled here, they would always make all kinds of jokes. Not to mention in esports, they were completely following their old ways. The members of the Supreme Alliance didn't know what they were laughing about. However, Luli knew that her face was extremely red. She just wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. After all, sometimes, even she felt that the people of Huaxia were too embarrassing. Especially those aunties. The things they did were simply laughable. Both Qin Mo and Fu Jiu knew this. But what he needed to worry about now wasn't the previous problem. But as Chinese, they were humiliated. Qin Mo came from the military compound. After hearing those words, he stopped, turned around, looked at Shuji, and said in a low voice, Do you know what we call your behavior in Huaxia? You only know how to bicker. Shuji's face darkened. He squinted his eyes and was about to retort, but Fu Jiu interrupted him. Two things. First, in our place, we only know how to quarrel, only bark. Fu Jiu stretched out a finger, following Qin Mo's words. Chapter 293. At that moment, Qin Mo and Fu Jiu, who stood side by side, seemed to have an unprecedented tacit understanding. There were no two people who could follow up the conversation so beautifully. All of a sudden, everyone in the training ground turned to look at them. Are you kidding me? Shuji, who is coaching Sakura's stream team? They can't do it, right? Not necessarily. I saw one of their moves, and it was very handsome. One of them took off his headphones, turned his head, and leaned back, full of laziness. On that person's screen, there was still the game page of Hero, and the ranking he had just refreshed, second, wearing a white shirt and a beige sweater. This person gave people a very gentle feeling, and even his face was very handsome. The training team member sitting next to that person saw his face, and he couldn't help but be shocked and wanted to say something. But that person put his finger in between his lips, smiled lightly, and made a shushing gesture. The training team member swallowed the two words, Hoshino, that were already at the tip of his tongue. That's right, the person hiding in the crowd was no one else. It was the vice captain of the strongest team in Japan, Hoshino. He looked at the scene not far away and smiled faintly. This time, Shuji was going to suffer a setback. No one from Huaxia should underestimate them. He had a lot of Chinese friends, and most of them were in the Xiangnan team. Last year, when China and Japan were one-on-one. Although they won, it wasn't an easy win. Never look at the people of China the same way they used to be. Never look down on them. And even if they had to fight with good manners. Obviously, Shuji didn't understand that. Hoshino didn't want to watch anymore. After all, he knew everyone in the Xiangnan team, and this Chinese team was obviously not the Xiangnan team. However, he was very curious. Just what kind of team would be able to produce such an aura? Especially those two people. Hoshino's eyes rested on the backs of those two people, but he didn't see their faces. He said to himself, I should have learned some Chinese characters. He didn't know if it was because he missed that person too much. As soon as he heard that there were Chinese in the training ground, he came over. Spade Z. Such a name would make him mistakenly think that he saw a Z. But when he thought about it carefully, it was impossible. Z, if he really wanted to give a name, why would he add a spade in front? He was probably an admirer of Z. These days, there were many titles with Z in them. Only Z was irreplaceable. He knew Z very well. After working together on so many cases, someone as arrogant as her would not add any prefixes. As expected, he had thought too much. Hoshino stood up, and his eyes dimmed. He put his hands in his pockets and walked towards the other exit with Fujio. He decided to give up on Huaxia and Dongying. Since he didn't have to participate in the competition, he would go back to Fifth Avenue to take a look. After all, that was Z's territory. He didn't believe what those people said. Z would disappear. As long as there was inequality in this world, Z would never disappear. Maybe it wasn't time yet. Wait until another case comes out. Z will appear. However, this was what he knew. Hoshino's judgment was completely wrong. If it was the Z of the past, she wouldn't have added a prefix in front of her name. Chapter 294. Except for the player sitting next to Hoshino, no one noticed his departure. Even Fujio herself didn't know that she had passed by her old friend. That player was still excited as he looked at Hoshino's back. He couldn't wait to tell everyone the news. In Japan, esports were treated with more respect than in China. In their eyes, playing games wasn't a waste of time. But sometimes, when there were more people, there would be more thoughts. How many people were self-righteous in life and ridiculed others without understanding them? It didn't matter about nationality or region. It was just that narrow-minded people would never realize their own narrow-mindedness. For example, Shuji right now. After listening to Fujio and Qin Mo's conversation, his face became more gloomy, and he even clenched his fists. You want to teach me? Shuji sneered and squinted at Fujio. One-on-one, do you dare? Fujio didn't say anything. She just raised her eyebrows at him with a lollipop in her mouth. If Hoshino saw Fujio like this, he would never leave so easily. The most important thing was that he decided to fly to America without seeing anything. Maybe this was the fate that people often talked about. However, the current situation was that Shuji wanted to kill the young man in front of him. He thought of a trick, and there was still viciousness in his eyes. Then come with me. I'm tired of playing hero. Let's change to something new. Don't go with him. That was Liuli's words. She wasn't thinking for Fujio, but if Fujio lost, Almighty Qin would lose face. Fujio glanced at Liuli and didn't reply to her. She pulled up her uniform and followed Shuji downstairs. Shuji wasn't alone. The two Sakura Stream players who were standing there also stood up after seeing this scene. The members of the three battle teams all went to the first floor. Popular arcade malls can be seen everywhere in China. But here in Tokyo, the scale was a little bigger. But it was these ordinary things that included all the esports events. King of Fighters, dance machines, drums, Tetris, and so on. Don't say I'm bullying you. Shuji smiled. Pick anyone, and we'll compete. Feng Shang could understand Tokyo dialect. Hearing this, he couldn't help but say, This is clearly a difficult problem for us. People in Tokyo were familiar with these esports events. After all, they would come here to play from time to time. As Huaxiao people, aside from playing games in internet cafes, they rarely went to Fun City. If this wasn't a difficult problem, what was it? What? You said it so nicely just now, but now you're chickening out, saying that I'm giving you more trouble. Shuji had a cold smile on his face. I just want you to know that you should just go and do your math problems. Esports is such a high-end thing, your brains can't handle it. Yu. Feng Shang clenched his fists angrily, but Fujio directly grabbed his wrist. Her dark eyes met Shuji's, and her aura didn't change a bit. I'm fine with anything. Why don't you choose? Interesting. Shuji's eyes shifted. How about Starlight? Chapter 295. I've never seen such a stupid Chinese. The other two members of Sakura Stream Squad said, how dare they compete with Shuji and Starlight? Don't they know how terrifying Shuji's speed is? Those Kali Squad members have competed with us before, so they should know. Gue and Lin Xiaotong, who had competed with Sakura Stream Squad, did know. But they wouldn't stop this useless young master from jumping into the fire pit. Since Sakura Stream Squad was here, they could let Fujio know that there was always someone better than her. There weren't many people in China who played this kind of game equipment. People who hadn't touched this kind of equipment couldn't play well at all. They would be happy if Shuji could beat him to death. People like Gue and Lin Xiaodong had no national righteousness in their hearts. Selfish people would never understand. Why did Fujio stand up again after refusing the challenge? It was because the opponent's words insulted her motherland. Starlight was a game similar to Dazzle Dance or Rhythm Master. Quick keystrokes depended on hand speed and reaction. But it was different. After all, this was not a computer or a mobile phone, but a game equipment. Even if some people didn't understand Japanese, they understood what Fujio meant when they saw her standing in front of Starlight. Lin Feng couldn't help but curse. Shameless, competing with what you're best at. Everyone in the world knew how familiar the Tokyo team was with these esports equipment. Little Spade would be at a disadvantage if they competed like this. Some people were worried, and some wanted Fujio to make a fool of herself. Only one person. He looked at the young man with his deep eyes. That kind of look was not just gentle. If you had seen a soldier, you would know what kind of look it was. Mysterious, firm, and very powerful. Like a towering Mount Tai, it exuded its unique charm. He stood where Fujio could see him if she turned around. This made Fujio smile faintly every time she looked back. Although the Almighty didn't believe her most of the time, he probably sensed something was wrong with her. After all, he was so smart. However, the strange thing was that at certain times, the Almighty always looked at her with this kind of reassuring look. Many times, it was like they were fighting side by side. This feeling was not bad. Fujio curled up her thin lips and placed her finger on the screen of Starlight. Shuji also raised his eyebrows and directly chose the most difficult song. After clicking into it, he chose the fastest song. When playing this game, everyone knew that their hands and eyes had to be fast, and they had to have a perfect sense of rhythm. Game start. Simple and crude. Whoever had the higher score would win. The members of Sakura Stream and Gue almost thought that Fujio was going to lose. If it was any other song, Fujio might have been able to score it based on her reaction. But this song, there were many arrows and there were quick flashes. The so-called quick dodge was when the arrow flashed by and you had to hit the rhythm of it. He might be able to react with a quick flash. But this song was played from all four directions at the same time. Fujio, shame on you. When Zhang Xiaotong saw this scene, she was filled with pleasure. She was waiting to see how this person would look when he was defeated. At the thought of this, she couldn't help but want to laugh. However, in the next second, Chapter 296, Clatter. When the key rang, two perfect characters appeared on the screen in a row. The more beautiful Fujio's fingers were, the more accurate the rhythm of her tapping was. Can't understand Flash? Are you kidding me? They thought she was faking it when she was playing games with lollipops in her mouth in the arcade city. Although she hadn't touched Starlight since her rebirth, but it didn't affect her original performance. After all, the rhythm master would come and play whenever he was free. But no matter how many words there were, they couldn't describe that magnificent operation. Arrows were flashing on the screen, and they were flickering. Even Coco, the cat-like teenager who claimed to play the most games, opened his mouth wide after seeing that speed. It was too fast. Not only was it fast, but it also made people dizzy. This gay who confessed to the captain, didn't he see it wrong? In just 1 second, the number of perfect characters had reached 60, and none of them were masters. This not only shocked the people of the Supreme Alliance, but also made the two members of Sakura Stream Squad directly widen their eyes. This, Mother asterisk her. How could there be such a psycho? Shuji, come on. Don't stop. Don't let him surpass you. Shuji could hear the sound on the other side, and when the sound of perfect broke 100 came to his ears, he squinted his eyes, and sweat gradually appeared on his forehead. It was an indescribable sense of oppression. He really couldn't understand why the young man, who looked harmless, would give off a feeling of suffocation the moment his fingers touched these electronic devices. Just as Shuji was thinking about this, the rhythm on the screen became faster, and the music score became more complicated. Shuji's fingers moved, and 2 of the arrows fell. Not only that, this song itself was very difficult. Shuji usually got 90 points at most. Don't underestimate a score of 90 points, which was the top 3 in all of Tokyo. The reason why he chose such a song was to make them lose miserably. But Shuji didn't expect that the opponent. Shuji's fingers suddenly froze while he was playing. That was because he had heard the loud sound of an explosion. In other words, the game wasn't over yet. His opponent had already broken the record he had set here. Shuji stiffened his neck and turned his head away. He didn't care about his screen anymore. He just stared blankly at the screen that hadn't been cut off. Perfect, but Fujio seemed to be completely immersed in it. Not only her right hand, but her left hand was also nimble and beautiful. Patter, patter, patter. Finally, with a bang, the game ended. The outcome of the battle was obvious. Fujio's score was more than 10 times that of Shuji. At that moment, Lin Xiaodong's expression was as ugly as it could be, because she felt that Fujio had not only slapped Shuji's face, but also hers. Her cheeks were burning with pain, and she was filled with hatred and jealousy. At the side, the Supreme Alliance members were stunned. Lin Feng muttered, "Captain, how does little Spade know how to play this?" Qin Mo's elegant and handsome side profile was very calm. As for why the youngster knew how to play, it was enough for him to know. There was no need to tell everyone. Lin Feng still felt that the guy walking towards them was a little too handsome, especially when he smiled at the captain. Even his white canine teeth were exposed, looking both youthful and evil. Chapter 297. However, Qin Mo, who was being teased, just raised his eyebrows indifferently. Then he took the jacket from Fengshang's hand and threw it to the young man casually. "Good guidance. It's cold outside. Put it on and let's go back." Fujio was very happy to be praised again. She put on the jacket with the lollipop in her mouth, regardless of Shuji's expression behind her. Xiangnan team, stop right there. We can't let the two players of Sakura Stream Team go like this. If what happened today gets out, their team's reputation will be damaged. We have to get back at them. Fujio tilted her head, smiled, and sneered slightly. Who told you that we are from Xiangnan Team? It seems that Sakura Stream Team didn't collect enough information. Hearing this, Shuji suddenly came back from his failure. He squinted his eyes, and his pupils were shocked. Not from Xiangnan. How could it be? Before the match, he had been watching this person's hand move with the mouse. His fingers were skillful, and the most important thing was the young man's hand speed. Very fast and beautiful. After seeing the young man play Starlight, he wanted to play a real game of hero with this person more and more. He had to fight with him in a 1v1 ranking match. But in China, wasn't Xiangnan the best team? Who else could it be? Thinking of this, Shuji couldn't help but shout, "Which team are you from?" Fujio didn't look back, but raised her right hand and pointed behind her. Behind the flying jacket, there was only a pure black logo, which was like a dragon and a phoenix dancing in the middle. Shuji didn't know Chinese, and he didn't know what team it was, which made his face turn gloomy. After returning to Sakura Stream Team, he pulled a senior team member who knew how to be a man over, and he lowered his head and wrote 2 words there. Supreme Alliance. That senior smiled and said, "Isn't this the other team we are going to compete with? That's strange. Why did you write their name?" Shuji didn't answer, but he looked down and scratched that piece of paper with his ballpoint pen. Then he laughed bloodthirstily. Supreme Alliance? The team that didn't even get into the top 3? He had to take revenge for this humiliation with his own hands. In fact, Shuji's skills in playing hero were much better than Starlight's. When he compared Starlight with Fujio, it meant that he looked down on Fujio. Unexpectedly, a horse would stumble. But it didn't matter. He would soon let them see what really sports was. On the other side, the Cali team had originally decided to stay in the same hotel as the Supreme Alliance. However, Secretary Liang suddenly told them that there was a change in the itinerary. Supreme Alliance would be training on their own. When Azure heard this news, she clenched her fists so hard that her fingers turned white. However, she had no choice but to smile and say, "Then we'll return to our country first. See you at the national competition." Secretary Liang nodded on behalf of Qin Mo and politely sent them out. In this way, Fujio felt much better. After all, she really couldn't stand people playing tricks on her nose. If the other party didn't leave now, she couldn't guarantee that she wouldn't hack into their computers. Feng Shang didn't think too much about it. There was only one thought in his mind, and that was that he could finally sleep with his idol and climb the ladder in his pajamas. At 9 o'clock in the evening, Student Feng carefully put on his pajamas and lay on the bed waiting for his idol to come out of the bathroom. Chapter 298. Student Feng's entire person became alert. What was going on? What was wrong with the hotel in Tokyo? Why did they open the door without the guest's permission? Feng Shang was still complaining in his pajamas, but he didn't expect that when he looked back from the bathroom. He saw Almighty Qin walking towards him with one hand in his pocket, and the other hand was playing with the room card that he had gotten from who knew where. Feng Shang. He thought that with the good upbringing of the Qin family, shouldn't he knock on the door before entering the room? The sound of water in the bathroom was still ringing, and the steam was everywhere. Fujio didn't know what was going on here. Feng Shang's hands froze the moment Qin Mo came in. He behaved like a mole. Captain, it's so late. Why did Almighty Qin come to their room?" "You did well today." Qin Mo's sudden compliment came in a calm voice. Feng Shang didn't understand. What did he do to make Almighty Qin think that he did well today? While Student Feng was still confused, Qin Mo raised his hand and threw the room card into his hand. "To reward you, you can have a private suite." Feng Shang looked at the room card in his hand, and his eyes widened. He finally mustered up the courage to refute. "I don't want a reward." He just wanted to sleep with his idol quietly, but Almighty Qin didn't allow it. Was this a reward? Oh, Qin Mo curled up the corner of his lips, and his side profile was perfect and cold. "Second young master, I don't think I'm asking for your opinion. I'm just informing you whether you want to go out by yourself or let someone escort you out. Every time Feng Shang heard Almighty Qin call him second young master, his back would stiffen, and it was even worse this time. It wasn't that he didn't want to sleep with his idol, but because Almighty Qin was too oppressive. In the end, baby Feng couldn't resist that cold aura. He silently picked up his clothes and walked towards the door, looking back 3 times with each step. The world was so unfair. Why did he have to use his strength to oppress others? There were 2 bodyguards in black standing at the door. Almighty Qin was obviously threatening him. Baby Feng was really sad. He had been looking forward to climbing the stairs in his pajamas all day, and now it was gone. As Qin Mo himself, he didn't feel any guilt. After getting rid of the extra people in the room, Qin Mo took the laptop and data cable from the bodyguard's hands and asked them to leave. The bodyguard looked at the pitiful student Feng in the hallway, and then looked at Boss Qin's handsome face. They didn't talk about the boss. However, wasn't Boss Qin being too shameless? The main reason Boss Qin came up with was the reward. Was it really appropriate to use it here? Poor second young Master Feng. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't be able to withstand Chairman Qin's devastation. The night gradually darkened. In the bathroom, Fu Jiu turned off the shower. After wrapping the new bandages around her body a few times, she put on a tank top, a pure white sweater, and a pair of coffee-colored trousers. She was dressed in a very Korean style. Her silver fringe was still dripping water, her nose was high, and her thin lips were smiling. Her skin was so white that it seemed like water was overflowing. She walked out just like that. Originally, she wanted to ask baby Feng to draw a towel for her, but when she raised her head, her fingers froze. Chapter 299. At this moment, his deep eyes were looking at her, and there was a bit of laziness in his gaze. That gaze seemed to be able to anesthetize people. If Qin Mo's fans came in at this time, they would probably be knocked down by this god before they could even open their mouths. Handsome and dangerous. Fu Jiu raised the corner of her mouth. Brother Mo, it's so late. Why are you here? Where's baby Feng? Qin Mo glanced at his handsome face, which was flushed from the shower. He averted his eyes and said faintly, I'm here to guide you on your gaming skills. Fu Jiu. So? Where did baby Feng go? Wait, she had a very bad feeling about this. Brother Mo, until what time are you going to guide me? Fu Jiu pushed her hair back and narrowed her eyes slightly. The water finally stopped dripping, but this action made her look even more eye-catching. The bright light shone down and outlined a faint halo on the youngster's side. It was so clean that one could see the fine hairs on it. Qin Mo looked back, and his deep eyes seemed to be soaked with alcohol. Before going to bed, after saying that, he added in a very faint voice, I'll stay with you tonight. Hearing that, Fu Jiu wanted to say something, but she saw that the man was looking at her calmly, as if he wanted to see what kind of expression she would give him. The Almighty was such a dangerous person. She knew it better than anyone. Sometimes, the more you try to hide, the more flaws there would be. Fu Jiu curled her lips into a light smile. Then I'll have to trouble you. Brother Mo. Qin Mo raised his eyebrows and directly handed the business notebook in his hand to the youngster whose words and actions didn't match his heart. Looking at his puffed-up cheeks, he couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth into a smile. Fu Jiu was confused. Brother Mo, you seem to be in a good mood. Yeah, Qin Mo didn't deny it. Fu Jiu was interested. What's so happy about? Tell me about it. Otherwise, if the atmosphere in the room was too single, it would be easy to cause problems. Qin Mo glanced at the youngster and said casually, for example, seeing you depressed. Fu Jiu turned her head decisively. She didn't speak because talking would achieve the Almighty's goal. She wouldn't be depressed because being depressed would achieve the Almighty's goal. She wanted to play games in a bright and sunny manner. It was indeed very bright and sunny. He quickly KO'd a player the moment he appeared. The player was really confused and sent a message. Bro, why are you so murderous? Can't we play friendly? The Almighty never played friendly with her. He didn't reply and continued to kill. Fu Jiu crossed her long legs and sat next to Qin Mo. The single beds in the hotel were usually very big, and two people could sit on the left and right side of the bed. The smile on Chin Mo's face deepened when he saw the youngster's speed. If Secretary Liang were here, he would definitely break down. Young Master Gio didn't even do anything. He just killed people a little faster. Why was Boss Chin smiling so happily? When it was about the fourth person, Almighty Chin finally put on his game coaching stance. He reached out his right hand and directly covered Fu Jio's hand that was holding the mouse. His thin lips carried a pleasant, light scent of tobacco. Here, pull back a little bit. When we play the team competition, we can prevent a sneak attack from behind. Chapter 300. It had to be said that Chin Mo's experience and skills could indeed make up for some of Fu Jio's shortcomings in a short time. At this moment, Fu Jio realized that no matter how fast her hand speed was, because Spade Z's level wasn't high enough, there would still be some obstacles. In fact, this was something that every team knew very well, even if they admitted that Spade Z was very good. But they wouldn't think that they would lose to Spade Z in a match. They were professional teams, so compared to the newbies in the selection contest, the National League was not that easy to get into. Chin Mo had discovered this problem from the very beginning, so he agreed to play dungeons with Fu Jio at that time. Apart from liking Fu Jio, another reason was that she could level up quickly by playing dungeons. Of course, playing in ranked matches was the same. In fact, battle results were very helpful for leveling up. But with this, they still couldn't compete with the Xiangnan team. Noticing that Chin Mo had stopped, Fu Jiu tilted her head with a puzzled look in her eyes. When the soft silver hair dried, it would become fluffy. Chin Mo saw that the young man was looking at him like this, and his eyes became dull again. It was nothing until they met the Xiangnan team. There were still 7 matches left, enough for his brother to practice. He was in charge of winning. If other teams knew Chin Mo's thoughts, they would all vomit blood. Did they look like punching bags? Practice? Chin Mo doted on his brother to a certain extent. This had something to do with the Chin family's upbringing. There was no other reason. As long as it was his people, he had to protect them. Sleepy? Chin Mo asked the young man. A man's voice was deep and pleasant, especially in the dark night. Fu Jio shook her head. She moved the mouse and gestured a 7 to Chin Mo. That meant she could play 7 more matches. Looking at such a hard-working young man, Chin Mo's eyes changed a lot. In fact, his brother didn't need to work so hard. But before he could speak, the phone beside him rang. Fu Jio thought it was business, so she raised her eyebrows and signaled him to answer. But Chin Mo knew very well that the song Castle in the Sky was specially made for someone. He stood up, took the phone, and said in a calm voice, "Hello. You took so long to answer my call. Are you in a meeting again?" The woman on the phone was very beautiful. Not only was she beautiful, but she also had an indescribable mature elegance. Anyone who saw her could not help but admire her temperament. She was indeed a popular movie queen. Even at this age, the beauty that she exuded was almost intoxicating. However, her elegance had been replaced by a small complaint, as if she was a little childish. "Did you know? Your Andy Wong already has a grandson." Chin Mo tilted his head and lit a cigarette. "I know. You only know 2 words? Who'd you pick up from?" Alas. The beauty was really helpless. She let out a long sigh and said, "I also want to hold a grandson." Chin Mo arched a brow. "You can get your Mr. Chin to steal one for you. Isn't he with you?" "Yes." The beauty's eyes lit up. "Do you want to talk to your dad? About that online girlfriend of yours?" Chin Mo's voice was calm. "Online girlfriend?" Chapter 301. But it didn't matter if it exploded. Since it was out, she didn't need to beat around the bush. "Son, our Chin family is not so conservative. You like to play games so much now? It's not strange that you know someone online. What does she look like? How old is she? Which family is she from? It doesn't matter if she's not in our circle, as long as you like her. When are you going to bring her home? Your dad and I can fly back anytime." The beauty said, and pulled the man who was reading a business magazine beside her. Right. The man was in a military uniform and looked noble. Yes, I'm free. The adjutant who was waiting behind the man was speechless. Chinamo was still holding his phone. He looked at the youngster who was playing games on the bed and became indifferent. I don't have a girlfriend. How is that possible? Son, don't lie to me. The beauty narrowed her eyes. Even though I'm not as smart as you and your dad, I still have the basic IQ. As far as I know, you've been playing games during meetings, which isn't your usual style. Also, you've been sending voice messages to people on WeChat and even waiting for them to call you. You're clearly in a relationship, and it's something that only a young man would do. After all, you've never had a girlfriend before, so you might not know about it. You can talk to me about this, and I can provide you with ways to pursue whoever you want. Right? So just admit it. Chinamo took a drag of his cigarette and said lazily, "Beautiful missin'. As far as you know, will Secretary Leon call you from time to time when he is with me?" The beauty was a little guilty. She lowered her voice and said to the man beside her, "What should I do? My son found out. It's natural for parents to look after their children." Chinamo heard his father's answer and raised his eyebrows. The beauty heard her husband's words and immediately became confident. "Son, you are deliberately changing the topic. What does that mean?" "It means that you're guilty. I did meet someone on the internet." Chinamo knew that there would be no end to this conversation, so he just admitted it. "But he is a man." "A man." After the beauty heard this answer, disappointment flashed across her face. "Son, you're not lying to me, are you?" Chinamo walked back, his left hand in his trouser pocket, his right hand holding onto his phone. He leaned against the headboard casually, lowering his lids to look at the youngster's furry head. "You can ask your spy, Leon." Hearing this, the beauty knew that it was hopeless. How could it be a man? However, "Son, have you been sleeping well recently?" In fact, this was what the beauty was concerned about. Chinmo's fingers paused, and he glanced at Fujio again. "Not bad. There's someone to sleep with now." "Sleep with me?" The beauty was really surprised when she heard this. She didn't know what she was going to ask. Chinamo said, "That's it. I'm hanging up." The beauty was speechless. Why was her son like this? But what kind of person could make his son let down his guard? Once this matter was over, she had to meet him. Ever since that case, her son had changed, even if nothing could be seen on the surface. But as a mother, how could she not understand her son? Chapter 302. On this side, Fujio was playing a game, glancing at Chinamo from time to time. At first, she didn't understand why the Almighty wanted to pick up the phone somewhere else. But now it seemed like he didn't want her to hear the content. Well, but she had good hearing, so she heard a little bit. Beautyin? This wasn't a name the Almighty would use. And it was obvious that the Almighty's eyes weren't as indifferent as usual when he was on the phone. Although it was just a little bit, it was strange for it to appear here. Could it be his girlfriend? Fujio tilted her head and thought. When she came back to her senses, she saw a lollipop in front of her, and it was chocolate-flavored. The Almighty's teaching method of giving her candy from time to time was very effective. Fujio personally enjoyed it. She tilted her head and wanted to bite it. But somehow, the Almighty lifted her chin up. Fujio frowned and wanted to move away, but she attracted his long stare. At that moment, her heart skipped a beat. Did he find out? Impossible. She didn't do anything. But his eyes were on her face, so deep and bottomless, Fujio felt an indescribable numbness in her body. She felt that he was so close to her that his breath could hit her face. Time seemed to have stopped, and it passed very slowly. The sound of the clock seemed to have merged with her heartbeat. Fujio was still thinking of a solution. She heard the man's voice slowly ring out, and it sounded a little cold. "What happened to your eyes?" Fujio reached out and touched them. They're infected, probably from looking at the screen for too long. So it was because of this. The Almighty could be quite scary sometimes, but usually it could divert a man's attention by saying that. Indeed, Chinamo took the coat and threw it into the youngster's hands. "Put on. We're going to the emergency room." Eye inflammation doesn't need an emergency room. Fujio thought it was normal. She just needed to find some anti-inflammatory eye drops. However, Almighty Chin wasn't someone who could take no for an answer, especially when a youngster was sick. He pulled her over and put the coat on Fujio directly. When Fujio saw that the Almighty was going to help her get dressed, she immediately straightened her back to show that she could do it. What if the Almighty touched places he shouldn't have when he was wearing clothes? Fujio's eyes were indeed a little red. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to tell. Chin Mo was the only one who could tell the difference. Fujio lowered her head and pulled up the zipper. The fox-white fur was wrapped around her coat and hat, and it was obvious that she was wearing it warmly. But after leaving the hotel, Chin Mo turned back to look at the youngster. He took off the black scarf around his neck and wrapped it around Fujio's face. Fujio felt that the Almighty was trying to dress her up as a bear, even though it wasn't Christmas yet. A hospital in Tokyo, not far from the hotel. The distance was less than 700 meters, and they just had to walk across the dazzling road. The two of them walked side by side, and their outstanding looks attracted many passers-by. It's very open in Tokyo. From time to time, exclamations of surprise could be heard. But what made Chin Mo raise his eyebrows was the content of their conversation. I've never seen such a beautiful couple. They're so compatible, and their height is perfect. It'll be beautiful when they kiss. Chapter 303. Of course, Fujio saw Chin Mo's movements. Although her nose was covered by the black scarf, her clear eyes were still exposed, so it didn't affect her observation of the Almighty's expression. Seeing the Almighty's abstinence, Fujio suddenly wanted to tease him, so she moved her scarf to the left, turned around, and looked at the high school students who were huddled together. She raised the corner of her mouth and said in a flirtatious manner, "Do you want to see us kiss?" Just now he looked very handsome from the side, and now his whole face was exposed. Even the girls in Tokyo couldn't resist the unknown temptation. Plus, the young man's exciting words. If they didn't understand it wrong, would he let them kiss if they wanted to see it? Was that so? The two high school students felt like they were about to faint, but before they fainted, they decisively expressed their thoughts and nodded heavily. What was different was that Chin Mo's expression turned even colder the moment he heard the youngster's words. With one hand in his pocket, he glanced over at Fujio, and the coldness seemed to shatter in his eyes. Fujio had never been afraid of this god. She curled up her thin lips and grabbed the man's collar. That posture was very seductive, especially when her other hand was holding Chin Mo's chin. Her handsome face was tilted, and it looked like she was about to kiss him. At such a close distance, anyone who saw it would feel that even the air was full of ambiguity. The girls were so excited that they almost went crazy. Live version, they could actually see the live version. Ah! Stop, what are you doing? Kiss, kiss. Of course, Fujio couldn't really kiss him. After all, she had been suppressed by this god for so many days, and she especially missed the way his face turned black when he was angry. But this time, it was very strange. The Almighty didn't even move a bit, nor did he step back. If she didn't control herself, she might have really kissed him. The Almighty. How could he be so cunning? Now, he didn't even get angry when he was teased. However, this time, Chin Mo didn't use any tricks. Even he couldn't explain why he didn't directly break the young man's wrist. Instead, he let the young man get so close to him. When the sweet and clean scent assaulted him, he had no intention of dodging at all. Instead, he only wanted to absorb more. On the left was the mark left by the boy's hooded jacket. The soft and warm white fox fur gently touched his face as the boy tilted his head. The area was so small that it was negligible. But Chin Mo's eyes couldn't help sinking, especially when he saw the youngster's beautiful lips right in front of his eyes. Chin Mo frowned deeply and looked down at the guy. "I'll count to 3. Retract your claws." 1. Fujio didn't move. After all, it was rare to see a god with such a dark expression. "Brother Mo, don't be angry. You won't look handsome if you are angry." 3. Obviously, Chin Mo didn't even like the middle of numbers. After counting the last number, He pulled the youngster's hat down with his right hand. She leaned forward and was about to kiss the young man's lips. Chapter 304. It was probably because they were too close. For a moment, Fujio felt that this posture wasn't friendly at all. Instead, it was full of danger, especially when the man was talking. The breath on her lips proved that what the Almighty said was true. Fortunately, the Almighty didn't lose his mind because of her anger. After saying that, he moved his hand away from her head. That handsome and fair face was still cold and noble, but that pair of eyes was filled with indiscernible depth. But at such a close distance, plus the fact that Shinmo's face was blocked, and he paused while speaking. To others, they would think that they had done something they shouldn't have. Hold me, I'm going to have a nosebleed. Fujoshi's behaved the same way no matter where they were. Fujio paused, then looked to the side with a chuckle. She said regretfully, "Nothing happened, no need to have a nosebleed." Would the girls believe that? Of course not. He's shy, he must be shy. He's so handsome even when he's shy. He's lying, and his face is so red. Fujio, say one thing but mean another. Receiving? Did she look like the one below? She was very aggressive, okay? If it were any other time, she would definitely show off her aggression. But the Almighty's back looked too cold, and it was written from head to toe that he was not happy. If she continued to provoke him, the Almighty would explode. For example, he would throw her into the trash can like a sack. Fujio, who always had a clear sense of danger, didn't do anything else. After all, it was very likely that the Almighty had a girlfriend. She couldn't flirt with someone who already had a girlfriend. That was the principle. For the rest of the time, Fujio was very obedient. With her eyes inflamed, she followed behind Shin-mo. Her handsome face was as fair as jade, and with her pure black coat, fox-white fur hat, and silver hair, she looked like a character from a comic book world. The stud on her left ear was still shining faintly. Fujio's eyes lit up. Shin-mo wasn't like his usual self. His eyes were so deep that it was scary, because even he didn't expect it. At that moment, he actually had the thought of kissing her. Shin-mo narrowed his eyes. His hands in his pocket clenched in a fist before loosening up. He must have been angry, facing the youngster's provocation. It was normal that he couldn't bear it. After realizing this, Shin-mo's eyes lit up again. He stopped walking and turned back to look at the youngster. Fujio immediately met the Almighty's gaze, and her thin lips curved into a smile. This time, the Almighty didn't show any mercy to the youngster. He grabbed the youngster's collar and dragged him into the hospital. After registering, he directly threw the patient onto the chair opposite the doctor. His posture was indeed very much like throwing garbage. Fujio rubbed the back of her collar and smiled at the dumbfounded Tokyo doctor. My brother is a hot-tempered person. I'm just giving in to him. Although the doctor didn't quite understand, he tried his best to look as if he had suddenly understood. Shin-mo was so angry that he laughed at his good brother. He rubbed the youngster's head with his fingers, and there was a familiar coldness in his gentle smile. Since you are giving in to your brother, you'll have to pay the medical fees yourself. Fujio, knowing that she loved money, the Almighty dealt with her in this way. Chapter 305. The Tokyo doctor was very careful. Fujio had already said that she only wanted eye ointment and eye drops. But the doctor was still very responsible and gave her a lot of medicine, including anti-inflammatory ones. As more and more medicine was prescribed, Fujio's handsome face looked like it had nothing left to live for. Something that could have been solved with a bottle of eye drops, but she had spent the money for a keyboard. If the Almighty hadn't brought her to the hospital on the spur of the moment, she would have thought that the Almighty was deliberately tricking her. But the Almighty seemed to be very sincere, and he was very much like a big brother, asking about things to take note of in a calm voice. The Tokyo doctor liked people who took minor illnesses seriously. He pushed up his glasses and said seriously, "Don't always play with your phone and computer. Young people nowadays like to play with those electronic products." How could it be? How could it be? For a hacker like Fujio, this was worse than starvation. Moreover, the Almighty would never agree to this condition. There was a friendly match to be played in the next 2 days. Who knew? The Almighty always surprised people. His voice was calm, and his attitude was calm. Okay. The old doctor saw that she respected him so much, so he was very enthusiastic. Also, pay attention to your diet. Don't eat beef or mutton, and don't touch chili. Fujio, she loved hot pots so much, but he didn't let her eat beef or mutton or chili. Was he really going to starve her? Most importantly, she had never seen the Almighty cooperate with anyone like this. She nodded coldly and said in a flat voice, "I will keep an eye on him." Just like that, Fujio came out of the hospital and saw the gloomy future the next 3 days. Brother Mo, it's not that serious. Fujio decided to use logic to convince the Almighty. It's all because of the bad weather in Jiang City and the heavy smog. My eyes are infected with bacteria, and I just need to use eye drops for 2 days. Moreover, the friendly match is the day after tomorrow. How can I miss it? Qin Mo's expression was very calm. He had wanted to smoke, but when he heard the word infection, he put away the slender black cigarette. I'll take your place. The Almighty wasn't in the team originally arranged. This was a friendly match after all. It wasn't worth the Almighty's risk. No, Fuji rejected him directly. Compared to Brother Mo's hand, my eyes are nothing. Obviously, Qin Mo didn't want to talk about his injury. I injured my left hand, not both hands. Fujio, so the Almighty wanted to play with only one hand? Almighty, when you say that, have you considered your opponent's feelings? The neon lights on the street dimmed bit by bit. When the two of them walked back, there were not as many people as before. The shadows under their feet were elongated. As soon as she returned to the hotel, the phone in her pocket rang. She took it out and subconsciously wanted to check it, but the Almighty pulled it back. Fujio looked back. Qin Mo's godlike handsome face didn't change at all. His voice was as light as ink, thick with the aura of a businessman. How could you forget what the doctor said so quickly? Hold back your desire to play with electronic devices for the next 2 days. Chapter 306. On the other side, Feng Shang, who was feeling wronged in his room, saw that his idol didn't reply to him, so he sent a voice message to his friend nicknamed Juju Brand Lollipop. He had to rely on his idol to get him back. If his idol insisted on sleeping with him, no matter how shameless Almighty Qin was, he would return the room to him. When the WeChat notification sounded, Fujio's eyes landed on it immediately. Seeing the young man like this, Qin Mo's hand that was opening the eye drops paused. He took the phone and turned it off with a calm expression. Fujio looked at the unread WeChat message on the screen, and she couldn't help but say sorry to baby Feng in her heart. Some things were really out of her control. Feng Shang saw that his message was still like a stone sinking into the ocean. He couldn't help but feel depressed. Did his idol prefer sleeping with Almighty Qin more than him? But what if his idol took things too hard and made a mistake? His idol also said that if he disobeyed Almighty Qin would break his hand. Feng Shang thought about it and couldn't help it anymore. He decided to save his idol, but as soon as he opened the door, he was blocked by 2 bodyguards in black. Feng Shang was dumbfounded. Why are you still here? CEO Qin asked us to stay and protect second young master. When the bodyguards in black said this, they couldn't bear to do it. But they had no choice. Their boss had always been so artistic with his words. Feng Shang, was this protection? It was obvious that he couldn't even leave. Baby Feng became listless again. After all, with his physique, how could he beat 2 big men? What was wrong with Almighty Qin that made him treat him like this? In fact, Feng Shang thought too much. For Qin Mo, the reason was very simple. His brother didn't want to share a room with him. Who else did he want to share a room with? Qin Mo did put a lot of effort in dealing with Fujio. It was probably just like what he said. Since he was the little brother he recognized, he had to protect him well. So he didn't even mind applying medicine. It was just that people like Qin Mo always resisted any medicine when their fingers touched it. But he couldn't bear to see the young man applying medicine with his head held high. He took the eye drops and pinched the young man's chin naturally. Fujio raised her pretty eyebrows. What was going on? What are you thinking about? Raise your head. Chinmo's porcelain white fingertips tapped on her chin. Fujio also felt that it would be better for someone else to apply the medicine on her. After all, everyone who had used eye drops knew about it. When one's eyes were inflamed, there would always be an indescribable stinging pain when the eye drops dripped down. If one applied the medicine himself, anyone would subconsciously blink. In the blink of an eye, the eye drops went to waste. He could only try again. So after hearing the Almighty's words, Fujio smiled and raised her head. She placed her right hand behind her back lazily and opened her eyes. She was still very handsome. His right eye was more serious than his left. At such a close distance, he could see it very clearly. Chinmo was standing so that it was convenient for him to apply the medicine on the youngster. When he bent down, he could get close to that handsome face. His slender fingers pressed on the youth's right eye, widening it before dripping the first drop of eye drops. Fujio subconsciously wanted to dodge. Chapter 307. It's really uncomfortable if I don't dodge. Fujio sighed. Sure enough, she couldn't win against the Almighty. Chinmo didn't listen to the youngster and put the second drop on his right eye. Fujio couldn't dodge and got stung. It hurts, but it works, Chinmo said as he rubbed the youngster's head. Fujio agreed. She didn't want to make things difficult for the Almighty. After all, he was not good at comforting people. Chinmo didn't want to see the youngster like this. He secretly decided to let the youngster eat more things to brighten his eyes. That way, he wouldn't look as listless as he was now. The third drop was on his left eye. It wasn't serious, so one drop was enough. Then the eye ointment, which wasn't easy to buy in Tokyo. After the ointment was applied, the eyes would be completely covered. It was sticky. Fujio wanted to open her eyes and look at the lights. Close your eyes and rest. Chinmo's voice was calm, and his fingers were still rubbing the corners of Fujio's eyes. It would make her feel better. But Fujio's profession made her naturally more vigilant than others. She couldn't see the other person's situation clearly. This was something she had never experienced before. Especially when she was a hacker, she liked to see all the situations in her eyes. This was one of the reasons why she could escape unscathed all these years. Except for Hoshino, she had never seen anyone, and she never trusted anyone. But ever since she was reborn, she seemed to be different from before. How should she put it? More down to earth. But this boundless darkness still made Fujio feel a little uncertain. She could still smell the faint scent of tobacco in her breath. It came from the Almighty. This was the only information Fujio could use to determine where the Almighty was. Her heart seemed to be disturbed. Fujio tried not to touch the person so close to her. If the Almighty misunderstood that she was flirting with him, it would be the worst thing to do. And she couldn't see the Almighty's eyes. She would feel that her identity was not safe, because she wasn't sure what the Almighty would see in this gap. So she couldn't let her guard down. Nervous? A deep and graceful voice came from beside her. Fujio smiled. Why would I? His back is tense. If he's not nervous, then what is? Fujio only felt that someone had touched her head. He heard the Almighty say in a low voice, "Did you forget again? Big Brother is a psychology major." Fujio simply admitted, "All right, I'm very nervous. It's too uncomfortable not being able to see." Chinmo lowered his lids and looked at the youngster in front of him who was complaining to him. His lips curled up, probably because he found it interesting. "Brother Imo, are you smiling now?" Fujio tilted her head and moved her ears. Chinmo nodded faintly. He really didn't hide it at all. Fujio felt that people who studied psychology were all chat killers. Just as she was feeling more and more uneasy, she felt a finger touching her ear. It was slightly cold and made her want to hide. However, she was forced back by him. It was an earphone. How do I give her headphones? Chinmo looked at the youngster's confused expression. He pressed the play button with his porcelain fingers and turned the volume to the maximum. Through the earphones, The pleasant sound of music broke through the darkness. A baritone voice that was neither too high nor too low reverberated in their ears. It was Eason Chan's song, which was very suitable for easing one's mood. Asterisk, 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 asterisk word for the readers. This sentence had to be written in the main text. Even if it was charged in the future, it wouldn't be charged. Originally, he wanted to update it at 6, but he received news that Tangyuan Creations was a website, was suspected of plagiarizing. School hunk again. Chapter 308. After going through so many people, I have to appreciate it even if I don't like it. I am a silent existence, not your world, only your shoulder. When she heard the warm lyrics, Fu Jio's heart softened all of a sudden, and even her back relaxed a lot. Because the Almighty was so powerful, she was always on her guard when facing him. Unlike when she was facing Baby Feng and Yao Yao, she had no scruples. The Almighty must have sensed it, so after being rejected by her, he had that kind of expression and back view. But in fact, every time the Almighty did it, he was protecting her. Although all of this was because the Almighty really thought that she was a man and treated her like his own little brother. But how many years had it been since she had tasted the feeling of being protected? And how many people would treat her so well? Not many people. The main thing was that the Almighty just looked at her, and he didn't doubt her. Fu Jio had always been happy about this. Fu Jio couldn't explain it, but she felt that this was a good state. In order to make her not nervous, he put earphones in and let her listen to music. Only the Almighty would think of such a way to pamper someone. Perhaps it had something to do with the Almighty's background. Although he was usually indifferent and domineering, he had a good upbringing, so it was always comfortable to get along with him. At that moment, all the noise in the world seemed to stop. In the darkness, Fu Jio could only smell the familiar peppermint scent. The light scent of a man was the same as the smell in the room, and there was a hint of tobacco in the silence. Tolerance could make people feel at ease. That was why people who studied psychology were really hard to deal with. Because when the Almighty was gentle to someone, he would use everything he had learned. After all, from a psychological point of view, music could make people lower their guard. Fu Jio smiled. Based on his scent, she determined Qin Mo's direction and lifted her legs to stand up. But she lost her balance and fell forward headfirst. Qin Mo was standing in front of the youngster. He was one step ahead of Fu Jio, and he held Fu Jio's hand. Because of the eye ointment, Fu Jio still had her eyes closed and couldn't open them. She simply raised her head and smiled in place of her gratitude. She didn't know how lethal she would be in this form. Qin Mo stood there, looking at the youngster's porcelain-like fair and handsome face. The delicacy under his fingertips made him unable to move his fingers away. He held on to the youngster just like that. His strong features seemed to blend in with the light in the room. Fu Jio closed her eyes, so she didn't see Qin Mo's face at all. Qin Mo's state was completely unlike his usual self. If he had to find a word to describe it, it would be somewhat out of control. The deepness in his deep eyes made him look like a vampire aristocrat living in the 19th century, arrogant and indifferent, yet appropriate and alienating. But when he gazed at the young man's lips, his pupils were as dark as ink, and there was a kind of soul-stealing attraction. His face was even more handsome. Under the light, it was like diamonds had shattered in his deep eyes. Qin Mo could feel that his heartbeat was different from usual. He did not know if it had become faster or slower. Chapter 309. Qin Mo lowered his eyes, and his eyelashes fluttered down quietly. His side profile was breathtakingly handsome. Fu Jio raised her head, and it was a beautiful picture. However, Fu Jio felt that the Almighty was getting closer to her, and his aura seemed to be rising as well. Even their breaths seemed to be entangled with each other. Was it her illusion? Fu Jio tilted her head and was a little confused. Brother Mo? The sudden voice abruptly broke all the ripples between the two of them. As though someone had pressed the pause button, Qin Mo suddenly stopped what he was doing. Their lips were only 3 centimeters apart. When the breath touched his face, Chinamo suddenly woke up, and even his eyes were a little shaky. This had never happened before. Was he crazy? He must be crazy. Chinamo pulled himself away and strode out of the room. Even his footsteps sounded like the wind. Fu Jio didn't understand. Why did she feel that the Almighty's aura had changed all of a sudden? And he even went out? Why? Fu Jio wanted to open her eyes, but her vision was still blurred by the ointment. She couldn't even see Qin Mo's expression clearly. What was going on? Fu Jio couldn't figure it out. She stood up and walked into the bathroom with her sense of direction that she had accumulated over the years. Anyway, she wanted to wash the ointment off her eyes first. It was too unhygienic to use her hands. Then she would go out to find the Almighty. At this moment, Qin Mo was only wearing a pure white shirt and black trousers. He didn't wear any underwear, and he looked very young. In fact, Qin Mo didn't go far. After he walked out of the room, his eyes gradually calmed down, and he directly leaned against the wall outside the room. His sexy and beautiful thin lips couldn't help but spit out a word. F***ck. He wanted to smoke, but he knew he couldn't do it here. He simply pulled his collar open. Coupled with his words, he always gave people the feeling that he was a hooligan when he was extremely handsome. There were always two complicated traits in Qin Mo. It was just that after so many years, there was nothing that could release this other side of him. But compared to the suit he wore in the company, he seemed to be more suitable for the current look. Dark, luxurious, and unrestrained. Only when he was like this could people feel that he was also a young master. Moreover, he was in existence with a red root. The nobility of his body didn't diminish in the slightest, especially his face. When he looked like this, it was especially attractive. The people in the courtyard had all said that this was clearly a master of thousands of flowers. But no one knew what he was thinking. A passing beauty saw Qin Mo leaning against the wall. He wanted to go up and strike up a conversation. That beauty smiled sweetly. She had come to the hotel with her friends. Because it was the best hotel, there were entertainment venues in the hotel. Rich people would always bring people into their rooms after they were tired of playing. Qin Mo had seen this kind of thing many times. So when one of the beauties walked over, he didn't find it strange at all. However, it was obvious that the beauty overestimated her charm. She smiled gently and said, "Handsome, do you want to go down and play with me?" Qin Mo didn't bother with her. His face was filled with coldness and indifference. Chapter 310. Qin Mo maintained his previous posture. His head was tilted, and he didn't even look at the woman. He smiled coldly and was about to speak. At this moment, there was a cracking sound. The door of the room was opened. After washing her eyes, Fu Jio came out and saw the Almighty leaning against the wall, as well as a fashionably dressed beauty in front of the Almighty. She had a hot body, and her eyes looked a little flirtatious. Fu Jio paused. What was going on? The person on the phone, who seemed to be his girlfriend? No, it doesn't look like it. Based on her understanding of the Almighty didn't like to dress too hotly, right? However, that was not necessarily the case. After all, men looked at women based on their figures. But Fu Jio still had the basic analytical ability. For example, based on the woman's aura, it was obvious that she had drunk alcohol and was slightly tipsy. The meaning in his eyes was also very clear, as if he was asking the Almighty, "Are you sleeping?" Although Fu Jio was a high school student now, she wasn't that young. Therefore, his reaction to this kind of thing was not very big. Instead, he met the Almighty's gaze and smirked. With one hand in his pocket, he raised his eyebrows. It was as if he was asking, "What's going on?" Qin Mo looked at the youngster's nonchalant expression and knew that he didn't care much about such things. If it was in the past, put it on someone else. His indifference was a sign of him adapting to the circumstances. After all, he didn't like it when some people saw something and assumed it to be that way. But now, Qin Mo felt a tightness in his chest, his gaze turning cold. Fu Jio was even more confused now. Could it be a girl hitting on him? The Almighty wants to agree? That should not be possible. The two equally handsome men stared at each other. It was as if the beauty beside him did not exist. The girl who tried to strike up a conversation with Chin Mo felt that ever since the youngster walked out, the man's aura had become colder. Even the surrounding air seemed to have stagnated. What was going on? Did they quarrel? The other beauty was very happy. She ran in front of Fu Jio cutely. Wow, you are so handsome. Sure enough, a handsome guy's friend is also a handsome guy. You two are together, right? Would you like to come and play with us? Fu Jio had one hand in her pocket. She raised her eyebrows and was about to reject him. They heard the Almighty's indifferent voice ring out. All right. This was what Shinamo said, but when he said this, his eyes were looking at Fu Jio. Just like that, the words "go away" that were on the tip of her tongue turned into a cold "okay" as the young man pushed open the door and walked out with a nonchalant expression. Fu Jio was a little surprised, and the corners of her beautiful eyes lifted up. Did she hear it wrong? The Almighty actually agreed. Could it be that she had come out at the wrong time, and the Almighty had originally wanted to agree? Haha, little handsome boy, your reaction is so cute. Don't worry, I won't do anything to you. Just go down and have a drink with me, but I can't guarantee what will happen to your friend. The girls in Tokyo were all very pleasant to hear. Fu Jio didn't understand what the Almighty was trying to say, but she couldn't just reject him. After all, this sort of thing was quite normal. Chapter 311. But the pretty girl beside Chin Mo blushed. She didn't expect to be able to date him. After all, judging from the man's expression just now, it was obvious that he wasn't interested in her at all. For a moment, she thought that he would tell her to get lost. She knew it. Everything was just an illusion. Her charm was still there. Pretty girls were very confident about their looks. With this thought in mind, she glanced at the man beside her again. She looked sideways from where she was, and she could see the man's smooth jawline and thin lips. She really didn't know what it would feel like to be kissed by such a man. After all, he gave her too little of a feeling, especially when the man raised his eyes. There was an indescribable coldness that seeped into her bones, and the noble aura he exuded was simply too handsome. Just thinking about it made her legs weak. She was so lucky. Compared to the places outside, the hotel was more formal. But the places to play were basically the same. The decorations were always magnificent and very luxurious. The lights weren't very bright, but there was a string of glass lamps hanging from the ceiling. Then there was the stage and the singers, as well as the rows of alcohol that could be seen. There were many wooden chairs under the stage, and everyone was rocking a sunflower in their hands. Of course, there was no lack of cigarettes in this kind of place. There were also girls who were dressed boldly. They wore exquisite makeup and exuded a pleasant fragrance. Their long legs were exposed, and they seemed to be smiling very happily. They swayed their waists along with the music, and they looked very enchanting. The moment Chin Mo walked in, he attracted countless people's attention. It was no wonder. That kind of ascetic temperament, placed here, was like a god coming to the devil's world of lust, very attractive. Even the way the women looked at Chin Mo was ambiguous. The hunting intent from their eyes was so obvious, but when they saw that the man already had a partner, they couldn't help but show a disappointed look. Then, they saw Fu Jio behind Chin Mo compared to Chin Mo. Fu Jio seemed to be born in a nightclub. First of all, her silver hair was dyed, and she had an evil smile at the corner of her mouth and a black leather jacket. This made her look like the lead singer of a popular idol group, naughty and handsome. God, so cool. Which team is he from? Are you new here? Maybe he's not a celebrity, but how can he be so handsome? I think he's going to hit on her. Look, he's smiling at us. The beauties were as excited as they could be. They really wished that they were the ones accompanying the young man. However, Fu Jio was really obedient this time. It was just that she was born with an aura. When she was a hacker, she used it to avoid some forms of pursuit. She would always choose places with more people. For example, the subway, internet cafes, and nightclubs. Of course, nightclubs were actually one of her favorite places. There was wine, music, and edible fruit platters. Most importantly, when he was bored, he could call a group of people he didn't know to play Ronin, one of her favorite games. Fujio's identity as a hacker meant that she rarely got close to anyone. Chapter 312. Because most of the time, she would sit in her card bag and play the eyes closed werewolf game. Then, she would watch those who wanted to catch her run past her in a hurry. That feeling was very interesting. To get the perfect disguise, she had to blend into life. This was her motto as a hacker. So, Fujio was a little similar to herself in this life. She liked to go to nightclubs. But Lord Jio didn't think that Fujio used to go to nightclubs to look at handsome guys. It should be said that ordinary people went to nightclubs to look at handsome guys or girls and to get high together. She was the only one who went to nightclubs to play intellectual games like Ronin. But this didn't affect Fujio's joy of coming to nightclubs again. Compared to being alone with the Almighty in the room, she would be discovered. It was also quite interesting to play Ronin here. It should be said that Fujio belonged to the darkness. Once she came to this kind of place, her eyes were exceptionally beautiful. When she smiled, it was as if all the lights would run into her eyes. The black earring on her left ear and the leather jacket of the same color made her look extremely fashionable. Paired with Fujio's face, it was obvious how cool she was. Chinemo also noticed the youngster's happiness. The more he was like this, the colder his eyes became. People who belonged to the darkness, once they entered the darkness, they would never be swallowed by it. Instead, they would control the darkness and be like the light in it. Fujio was such an existence. She tilted her head, and the corners of her mouth curled up even more. She was like a handsome devil in a comic book, but she didn't have a black tuxedo or gloves. But this didn't affect her temperament. Chimo's personality was of course good at sitting in a booth, and so was Fujio. There were soft sofas in the booths here. The decorations were all dark, but there were many diamonds inlaid on them. When the light shone in, it looked very luxurious. There were carpets on both sides of the walkway, and black dice cups were placed on the solid wood table. The two beauties sat down and ordered a dozen beers and beautiful cocktails. It was said that alcohol could liven things up. The woman sitting next to Chin Mo flipped her long hair, wanting to get closer to the man. "You didn't answer me just now. Where are you from, and what do you do? How can you be so handsome? Could it be a boy group that hasn't debuted yet?" In a place where the light couldn't reach, Chinemo gently swirled the wine glass in his hand. His slender fingers held a thin mini cigarette. Through the rising smoke, only the pure white shirt he was wearing could be seen, sexy and lethal. He didn't open his mouth. His left hand froze for a moment as he stared coldly at the silver-haired youth who was chatting with the beauties nearby. In fact, Fujio didn't do anything bad. She wanted to find someone to play with. Werewolves with their eyes closed when it's dark. He had to find a few more people to form a team. Usually, it was a group of 9 people and a judge. That was 10 people, so she wasn't flirting. Chapter 313. Fujio didn't know what was going on here. But when she looked up, under the light, she didn't know what the Almighty had heard. His lips curled up slightly, and the coldness in his eyes deepened. Chin Mo tilted his head and glanced at the woman in front of him coldly. He knew very well that in the eyes of ordinary people, this woman was very attractive. But in his eyes, it was useless. She wasn't even a third of his brothers. It was even disgusting. Chin Mo had always been a clean person. When he saw the color of a woman's lips, he couldn't help but compare it with the youngster. But when he compared, his brows furrowed even more. "Wipe it off." The woman was a little confused. "What? Didn't he hear her condition? Wipe off the mess on your mouth. Maybe I can accompany you." Chin Mo's words were very cold. Obviously, he didn't mean it, but the woman laughed immediately. She liked this kind of challenge. She took out a tissue and wiped it on her lips lightly. Of course, she couldn't really wipe it all off. After all, which woman would leave her face bare in front of a man she was interested in? It didn't make sense. Leaving a little bit of color would make it more attractive. Wipe it all off. It was another 5 extremely cold words. The woman paused, then she patiently wiped it again. Is this okay? Look at me. I listen to you. Chinamo looked at the clean lips and slowly leaned over. The woman's heart was really beating fast. She had never seen a man with such a beautiful posture in front of a family member. She really couldn't control herself anymore. However, before she could lean over, the man pulled away, looked at her indifferently, and said emotionlessly, "I can't kiss you anymore." The woman's face was about to split open. What did he mean? Was he playing with her? But looking at the man's face and temperament, she felt that she was drunk again. Let's have a good time. I know the rules in your industry. How much does a kiss cost? Give me a price. Any price is fine. Chinamo didn't listen to her at all. Instead, he looked back at the youngster who was walking over. Rather than saying that he couldn't kiss, he didn't even have the interest to kiss, even disgust. But why at that time? He couldn't control himself, brother Mo. Of course, Fujio saw how the Almighty pulled away and how he was about to kiss her. But she didn't know why the Almighty had such a reaction. The only thing Fujio could think of was that the Almighty suddenly disliked that woman for being dirty. After all, she had seen the whole process, including the woman applying lipstick twice in a row. It was too obvious. With the Almighty's misophobia, who will want to be his girlfriend in the future? However, he seemed to be quite indulgent towards the beauty on the phone. As Fujio thought about it, she felt that she had been too nosy. What was the point of thinking so much about the Almighty? When Shin-Mo heard the youngster's words, his gaze couldn't help but fall on the pale, thin lips. He knew very well what kind of lips those were. As long as he got closer, he would be able to smell the faint scent of candy. Chapter 314. The fashionably dressed beauty saw that the man she was talking to was only looking at the young man. He didn't even look back. She couldn't help but ask again, "Tell me, how much do I have to pay for you to be willing? I can pay for your friend too." She had never been so generous to a man before. After all, she didn't even need to ask for anything in the past. At first, Fujio thought that the Almighty was interested in this woman. Now that she heard the woman's words, she realized that the Almighty was being offered a price. She wanted to laugh. What should she do? "Pretty lady, are you sure you want to talk to my brother like this? He can't be moved by money." Fujio walked over with a light smile. Even the corners of her beautiful eyes were half-hooked. She leaned against Shin-Mo just like that. Her left hand hit the back of the sofa, looking like a wanton in the dark. Of course, it was also extremely cool. The girls on the opposite side all blushed. The pretty lady who was clinging to Shin-Mo laughed. "Little handsome, I'm giving your brother not only money, but also a bright future. You haven't debuted yet, right? If you want to be known by the public or get on a show, I can help you. But your brother won't even let me kiss him." That pretty lady glanced at Shin-Mo from the corner of her eyes. She seemed to be saying, "How could there be such a cold man?" Fujio leaned back and whistled. She turned around and looked at the Almighty. "Brother Mo, a kiss from you is worth the price of a show." She wanted to tease the Almighty. After all, you all know. But who would have thought that Shin-Mo, with a cigarette between his fingers, seemed to have sobered up a little. Then he said in a calm voice, "Compared to someone who threatened to spend 10 million to sleep with me, a show is nothing." 10 million? That pretty lady frowned heavily. She was wondering why men were so arrogant. It turned out that her offer was too low. Who was it? So rich? 10 million to sleep with a person. Was that person crazy? Fujio successfully shut up, because the person who threatened to spend 10 million to sleep with Almighty Chin was herself. That's right, it was her. In the cafeteria, she was the one who only saw the back of young Master Chin. Fujio, why were you so infatuated? However, it had been a long time since that incident. Did she have to be the Almighty's bad name? All of Shin-Mo's unhappiness faded with the youngster's downcast, handsome face. Sure enough, there wasn't anything wrong with him. It was just that this kid was too good at flirting, causing him to have an illusion that he shouldn't have had in that instant. Fujio was still depressed. She was really depressed, and she didn't try to hide the expression on her face. This made things even more interesting for Shin-Mo. However, if someone dares to raise the condition of 10 million yuan, I can agree to it. Let's see how he will sleep with me and not the other way around. With that said, Chin Mo leaned towards Fujio. His shirt was still unbuttoned, and his breathing was deep. What do you think, Lord Gio? Fujio completely understood the Almighty's speech pattern. He even called her Lord Gio. Seriously, she finally understood why Baby Feng's back would stiffen whenever the Almighty called her baby phone. Chapter 315. That beauty really felt that the man was paying too much attention to the young man. Thinking about it again, there were other little vixens competing with her for a man. She couldn't help but clench her teeth and make up her mind. It's just 10 million. I have it too, provided that you can make me happy, handsome. Apart from money, I can also give you more prospects. Hearing that, Chin Mo just laughed in a low voice. His eyes swept over that silver head, and then he put his eyes on the wine bottle beside him. He said two words very coldly, not interested. She was rejected in front of so many people. The beauty's face turned ugly as well, especially when a few people around them laughed happily. She couldn't hide her arrogance anymore. Aren't you celebrities out to sell yourselves? Why aren't you interested in me? Teasing was one thing, and hearing others talk about the Almighty was another. Fujio raised her head and raised her eyebrows. Who told you that we are celebrities? Who told you that we are out to sell ourselves? Stop pretending. Just admit it. It will be good for you. That beauty's attitude was very indifferent. Fujio chuckled and put her arm on the Almighty's shoulder. Her black leather jacket hit the dark wooden table as she leaned forward. That posture made her look like a demon. Do you know why my brother isn't interested in you? Fujio asked. Do you know why my brother is not interested in you? Because he is my mistress. I was the one who threatened to spend 10 million to sleep with him, which means that we are not short of money. Do you understand? When Fujio said that, there was a slight curve at the corner of her mouth, and the black diamonds on her ears shone with a mysterious light. It was very rebellious. If it were any other time, that beauty would definitely be mesmerized by him. But the young man's words were like a muffled thunder that struck her. She hated gay men the most. She really didn't expect to meet one in real life. After all, that man looked so perfect. How could he be gay? She didn't even think in that direction. She finally understood why that man would look at the young man like that, as if he wanted to swallow him whole. That kind of gaze was too deep, so deep that it made people feel sexy just by looking at it. She had thought that it was a characteristic of men to begin with. After all, the book said that the more abstinent and domineering a man was, the stronger his ability and needs in that aspect would be. Therefore, he would naturally emit strong hormones. Only now did she realize that the man's hormones only targeted the youth. Not only did the beauty feel that her enthusiasm had been wasted, but she had also asked a fake man out. The exquisite makeup on her face was about to crack with her anger. She clenched her hands and said, "You perverts are so disgusting." Fujio raised her eyebrows. Chin Mo's gaze turned cold. But before he could say anything, the people around him looked at the beauty with disapproving expressions. What? It's obvious that the man and the young man like each other. She's calling him disgusting because he rejected her? From the very beginning, her words have been very harsh. No matter what, we shouldn't judge anyone's sexual orientation. If you don't like it, just leave. After all, that circle is messy. I don't like it either, but I won't call it disgusting. Tokyo was more open-minded, and people were more rational in this aspect. Seeing that beauty like that, they all started discussing. That beauty had never suffered such a loss before. Her eyes turned vicious, and she stood up with her purse. Chapter 316. That beauty's name was Junko. She often came to this hotel, and she was a VIP customer. She got to know a lot of people here. She couldn't tolerate being humiliated. She had overheard the conversation between the two of them just now, and they had spoken in Chinese. It seemed that they weren't from here. Although they spoke in Japanese, it couldn't hide the fact that they were from here. Since they were from China, she would just beat them up. Anyway, they couldn't say anything. Junko walked into the darkness, and the beauty behind her was still trying to persuade her. Forget it, forget it. Let's go find someone else to play with. Don't be angry. Besides, they didn't spend your money, so there's nothing to lose. Who said there's nothing to lose? You're affecting my mood. Some people were just like that. They thought they were right even when they did something wrong. Her friend was helpless. She couldn't keep up with her, so she took her bag and went to find someone else to play with. She came here to have fun, and she couldn't control Junko. But it was a pity that those two handsome faces were wasted. She knew Junko's tricks very well, and the gangsters here were very familiar with Junko. It wouldn't be a problem to deal with those two Chinese people. Sigh. What a pity the chatter in the card bag didn't stop. Especially after knowing that Fu Jio and Qin Mo were a couple. The women on the other side became even more excited. I see. I was wondering why such a handsome man would be with Junko. She probably hit on him, but the two of them look so compatible, especially the way Lil Shou is resting on Lil Attacker's shoulder. It's so cool. It makes people want to crush him. Fu Jio the second time. This was the second time that she was called a girl today. Even though her movements were so aggressive, it was obvious. Hey, beauties, just look at her movements. She was such a man. What on earth was wrong with her? Speaking of which, sometimes Fu Jio didn't understand why the girls were so excited. In fact, gay love was the same as lesbian love. The circle was indeed messy, and there would be many problems. It wasn't as beautiful as they thought, and there were many AIDS carriers. Fu Jio lived on Fifth Avenue, so she knew this very well. But she respected everyone's sexual orientation, especially when there was a parade on Fifth Avenue every year. She often joined the parade and spoke up for love and democracy. However, shouldn't the Almighty thank her? After all, she was the one who forced the Almighty to retreat. With this thought in mind, Fu Jio turned around to ask for a reward. Who knew that the Almighty would raise his hand and pull her over? His breath landed on her face just like that. With a seductive smile, he said, "Since you're our Lord Jio's mistress, of course, I have to give Lord Jio some benefits. Lord Jio, as the mistress, what do you think I should kiss first?" Fu Jio frowned. The plot should not have developed this way. The Almighty was indeed abnormal. It's here. Qin Mo stretched out his finger, and his cold fingertip touched Fu Jio's forehead. As he narrowed his eyes, his eyelashes cast a faint shadow on her face. Here or here. At the end of his sentence, Qin Mo's fingers rubbed Fu Jio's lips. Chapter 317. The experience of someone else's fingers lingering on her lips. Fu Jio had never experienced it before. That was why she was a little stunned. Qin Mo's eyes were very dark, and it was an extremely deep darkness. Very seductive. The softness between his fingers was something he had never felt before. The friction was like the prelude to a passionate kiss. The people standing at the side were all dumbfounded. At that moment, even the sound of the noisy music in his ears had faded quite a bit. Those beauties thought that this scene would end with a fierce kiss. They were even prepared to take a deep breath. Unexpectedly, in the next second, the youngster laughed. She leaned forward, and her face was very close to Qin Mo. "Brother Mo, I'm the one who protected you. Even if you want to kiss me, I should be the one to take the initiative." After saying that, Fu Jio stood up handsomely. With one hand on the sofa, she bent down and looked at Qin Mo from the side with a very beautiful posture. Her thin lips kissed the left side of Qin Mo's face near his chin. Qin Mo's pupils dilated, and he frowned subconsciously. That wasn't a kiss at all. It was more like some rich young master flirting with a beauty. Then there was a faint, proud smile. Looking at the youngster's face, Qin Mo's eyes deepened. Even though the action of his thin lips brushing across his cheek was too rough, he could still feel what it felt like. It was like being caressed by a feather. Very light, very numb, but Fu Jio was really happy this time. Even the Almighty's expression was different. It was obvious that he didn't expect such an action from her. But in that situation, a person like the Almighty, who didn't care about what others thought of him, might get so angry that he would kiss her. Flirting back like this was the best way to deal with it. And messing around between brothers shouldn't be a big deal. At most, the Almighty would activate his freezing skill again, and she would be the one to take the knife. But looking at the Almighty's expression, he could kiss her at any time to teach her a lesson. She had better get away first. Fujio thought about it, and was about to lift her head to retreat. She didn't know why, but her wrist was suddenly pulled back by the Almighty. The Almighty's expression wasn't quite the same as usual. He didn't have the usual gentleness, but his handsome face was dark and fierce. What was going on? Fujio didn't have time to react. A loud clang was heard. Something hit Qin Mo's back and head. That noise made Fujio's eyes widen. Qin Mo lowered his lids and turned his body sideways. His arm was behind her, protecting her on the sofa. The man's black hair was already wet, and he didn't have his usual business aura. Fujio could clearly see his drooping eyelashes, which were evil and wild. That kind of environment didn't make him look the least bit disheveled. On the contrary, when he lowered his head, it gave Fujio a thrilling illusion. Fujio didn't have much reaction. She saw that the big man behind Qin Mo was still holding a wine bottle. Her eyes, which were originally harmless in front of Qin Mo, suddenly darkened. It was completely dark. This was the real her. The back of Qin Mo's head wasn't bleeding, but at that moment, he hadn't held onto the youngster. After the young man got up without saying a word, he picked up the wine bottle beside him and smashed it at the other party. Chapter 3:18. This time there was blood. Those guys didn't have time to react at all. Fujio had already kicked one of them to the ground. Her actions were ruthless, and her eyes were cold. She only kicked one person, and she didn't intend to stop at all. No one expected that the young man could be so ruthless. Junko's face turned pale as she watched from the side. She said to the people next to her, "Why are you still standing there? Hurry up." Those gangsters finally reacted, and they were about to rush over. However, before they could get half a meter away from the young man, a strong gust of wind came right at their faces. It was Qin Mo. He picked up the wine bottle on the wooden table with his right hand and smashed that guy's head. His skills were even more horrifying than Fujio's. His fingers were stained with blood, but it didn't affect his temperament at all. His perfect abdominal muscles were full of smooth lines. As he waved the wine glass, the onlookers burst into exclamations. If someone was too beautiful even in a fight, then he would be really handsome. Qin Mo was such a person. His tall and slender silhouette matched with his deep eyes and calm expression. Those who would fight felt a chill from the bottom of their hearts. Baka, the people who started the fight, cursed in a low voice. Who the hell did Junko mess with this time? Why was he so difficult to deal with? Where was the Chinese soft-footed shrimp? When the pain came, they only felt dizzy for a while. However, the man didn't seem to pay attention to them. Compared to them, he seemed to care more about that silver-haired young man. Those people then noticed that the young man hadn't stopped since the beginning. Was he going to kick Kumamoto to death? Kumamoto was a big guy, and he had never been beaten like this before. But now, he didn't even have the strength to fight back. Even if he held his head, he couldn't resist the pain. It was too ruthless. The strength of those kicks on his body. Damn it, his back must have been injured. Stop, stop. Kumamoto was in so much pain that he almost begged. But Fujio only curled up her lips and kicked him again. Then she bent down in a very handsome posture, lifted Kumamoto up, and gave him a heavy punch. Stop. Are you dreaming? Fujio had to admit that she couldn't control herself. That was because she had never expected the Almighty to be injured. Moreover, he was injured because of her. This cannot be tolerated in any way. Which hand did you use to hold the glass just now? Fujio looked at the man who was beaten to the ground by her. Her eyes wandered, and she looked like a devil that walked out of a comic book. She asked in a low voice as if there was no one else around, "Is it this one?" As she spoke, she looked at the Kumamoto's right hand. "Or this one? Oh, of course, I can also break your back. After all, you hit my brother's back, right?" When Fujio said this, her murderous aura was really strong. He wasn't the kind of person who could be easily bluffed. Instead, it was a genuine killing intent. At that moment, Kumamoto thought he was going to die. Fujio smiled and lifted her long legs again. But at that moment, an arm stretched out towards Fujio. Chapter 319. He pulled her back, covered her eyes with one hand, and pulled her into a slightly cold embrace. When the faint smell of tobacco came, the thick smell of blood in her nostrils lessened a lot. Perhaps no one expected that it would be Chin Imo who stopped Fujio at this time. The man stood tall and slender, with long legs and a handsome face. His pure white shirt was stained with blood, but even so, it couldn't hide his natural aura. He was different from everyone else. If one had to describe him, it would be like a well-polished jade, completely untouchable. Especially when he covered the young man's eyes. That low and deep voice was even more so. Do you want to kill him? Then close your eyes. It's inflamed, so it's better not to see so much blood. Hearing that, Fujio's back stiffened, and she didn't move again. She knew that the Almighty was telling her to calm down. Fujio did calm down. Her long legs touched the ground, and she didn't kick again. She seemed to have returned to normal. After all, the Almighty had an aura that made people feel at ease. That aura wasn't completely gentle. There were too many things that couldn't be put into words. But those people next to him thought that this was their chance, and they wanted to take this opportunity to sneak up on Chin Imo. Chin Imo was never a person to be trifled with. He pulled the youngster with one hand, raised his long legs, and kicked those people to the ground, one after another. That movement was accompanied by the wind, and it carried a sense of dominance. No one dared to take another step forward, especially when one of them was beaten half to death. They didn't dare to be rash anymore. Fujio's eyes were covered by the Almighty the whole time. She didn't see anything, but she could hear the sounds one after another. The table was completely broken, and the floor was full of glass. When the Almighty moved his hand away, someone fell to the ground, and someone was running away in panic. Junko's face was deathly pale. Seeing Fujio look at her, she shivered slightly and ran away quickly. It was too scary. Both the youngster who kept kicking people and the man who beat them couldn't get close to them. These two people were too scary. Fujio only had time to see the Almighty throw the youngster to the ground with one hand. Was this person like this even in a fight? Even if he was covered in blood, he would still give people a kind of orderly charisma? Inexplicably, Fujio felt like she had seen such skills somewhere before. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, an extremely familiar scene flashed before his eyes. Fujio felt her heart skip a beat. He didn't even bother with the escaping Junko. Instead, she glanced up at Chin Imo. It was unlikely. The Almighty probably hasn't been to the Fifth Avenue. However, who could say for sure? After all, their skills were so similar. If Fujio hadn't seen it again, she would have forgotten about it. Just 3 years ago, she was almost caught by someone. She couldn't see what that person looked like because the light was too strong and blurred her vision. After she finished the last case, she thought she was safe. She blended in the crowd, changed her clothes, and even put on a wig, just like every girl going to a masquerade party. She held a purse in her hand and wore a black robe with a hat. She had a faint smile on her face and left the policeman behind beautifully. Chapter 320. The delivery truck that had been parked in front of the ball suddenly turned on its headlights. All of the light beams were like radars, all locked onto her. Just then, a person jumped out of the truck. His movements were very handsome and neat. He didn't look like a regular customer that she had met before. The person stood with his back to the light. Other than the school uniform he was wearing, she could roughly tell his age. There was nothing else. The lights were so bright that she couldn't see anything from her position. He stood there with one hand in his pocket, his voice calm. "I've heard a lot about you, Rosie." At that time, she didn't expect anyone to recognize her. Fortunately, she was wearing a long black robe, dressed as a comic villain. the Grim Reaper. The large black hat on a robe gave her a good cover, so much so that no one could see her real face, let alone see her expression. The police officers rushed out from behind the man. She heard some people asking in disbelief, "Are you sure it's her? She's a lady." "Who told you that Z is a guy?" "That person is a high school student, but in front of the police, he seems to be in control of the situation." But the information we received, the police wanted to say something, but the person laughed. The man chuckled. "Yes, it was your accurate intelligence that allowed Zero to roam freely for half a year." The police. Why was this Chinese person hired by F so difficult to communicate with? Was he bullying them because they didn't know how to speak? If it wasn't for the fact that the timing wasn't right, she would have liked to give that person a thumbs up, because she could clearly hear the police gnashing their teeth after the man finished speaking. However, that person was here to capture him. That was another matter altogether. She was very clear about the principle of distinguishing between friend and foe. Although she admired the other party's intelligence, using that kind of intelligence on her was a little tricky. She had never met such a difficult opponent. The moment he appeared, he intercepted her, and she didn't know when this person had come to the Fifth Avenue. However, this was the Five Great Ways after all. It was her territory. How could she let an outsider capture her just like that? It had always been her style of doing things to keep a hand in everything. She did not raise her head. Instead, she smiled and raised her right hand. "Smith, you should recognize this." Smith was the person in charge of Fifth Avenue. When he saw what Z was holding, his expression changed. "Bomb time bomb." She smiled faintly. "That's right, it's a time bomb. How about this? Since you've caught me, I'll give you a chance. This time bomb is nearby. Do you want to catch me or dismantle it? Choose one." Smith gritted his teeth. It was obvious that the safety of the personnel was the most important. "Don't listen to her. There's no bomb." That man was surprisingly calm. Her heart skipped a beat. If the police didn't fall in her trap, she wouldn't be able to get away. The man looked at her, his face blurred by the light. Chapter 321. Cold sweat broke out on Smith's forehead when he heard Z's words. It was true. Z's style of doing things was to leave a warning every time. She would also use many online platforms to tell everyone why she was doing this. Those people were all guilty of heinous crimes. But even so, doing this would be challenging their authority. So he had to catch Z and capture her alive. What should we do? Smith couldn't make up his mind. The person was insistent. She wouldn't plant a bomb here. All the records show that Z wouldn't hurt ordinary people during her operations. This time will be no exception. She's playing psychological warfare with you. Smith was in a dilemma. Although the person she hired was a psychologist, what if Z really planted a bomb here? There were so many people on Fifth Avenue. If there was an explosion, it would be over. Z was really cunning. Every time, she would blend in with the crowd and pick the most crowded places to attack. Since Mr. Smith is having a hard time deciding, I'll do something small for you to see. She knew that Hoshino was ready. She moved her finger. Bang! The sound of an explosion came from not far away. Smith's expression changed. He shouted, "Stop! Z, stop it right now. Don't be nervous. This is only the first one. There are 7 or 8 others buried nearby. Mr. Smith, I just said that you have to make a choice. Also, if you shoot randomly, you will hit a bomb. F***CKU. Smith thought of this sentence in Huaxia at that moment. He was really annoying. At that time, when she saw Smith's expression, she knew that she was about to succeed. So, she calmly put her hand behind her back and touched the magnet that was stuck to her back. How could she not have some escape tools when she was in this world? As expected, Smith's face turned green when he heard her words. He shouted, "Don't shoot." The sound of an explosion could cause panic. The crowd was no longer as calm as before. Once they heard that there were more bombs, they started to panic and wanted to escape. Taking advantage of that moment, she forcefully tore it apart. The powerful suction from the iron-sucking device caused her to fall back dozens of meters effortlessly. Her entire body was directly glued to the celebratory iron horse. It would be a lie to say that it didn't hurt, But the most important thing was to escape, because it was obvious that the person had his eyes on her when she retreated. It was precisely because his movements were too methodical that she remembered this moment. If it weren't for her escape, he would have grabbed onto her hand with one move. In fact, at that time, he did grab her long sleeve, but the fabric was too fragile and broke. But even so, she, who had never shown her face in front of others, revealed a flaw. That was her long hair, which was exposed outside. She couldn't care less. In the midst of the chaos, she heard the police say, F***CK. Z tricked him again. There was no bomb. They were firecrackers. The sound just now was from firecrackers. At that time, she thought that there would be a lot of trouble. She didn't expect that after she came out for more than 10 days, that person had already disappeared from the fifth path. That person's identity was also quite mysterious. The reason why she called him mysterious was because even she had not found out who that person was. The only thing he knew was that the man was from Huaxia, just like him. Fu Jiao raised her eyes again and looked at Qin Mo, whose white shirt was still stained with blood. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.